Check two. Check two. Two. He's drinking the drink. It's still going. Still going. Nearly 3 years into this thing. Excuse me. Nearly 3 years into this thing. Still doing it. I'm not even getting any material. I used to be getting some material benefit for it. I used to be able to get this beverage free of charge. And now I don't even get that. Yet I'm still doing it. I'm still doing the promotion. What is up with that? What's going on with that? That's good stuff. That's good stuff. I'm just looking for like a meme. Yesterday, I think I had some success posting that Shrek meme with the go live thing. And I'm seeing if I can replicate that. I'm seeing if I can replicate that success, that viral success. I don't know though. I haven't found anything that's like really speaking to me. I haven't found anything that's speaking to me here. The prodigal they them returns. Well, welcome back, Marina. Hope you had a nice time. I saw that there was some intra-community hookups going on. Yeah, I pay attention to this shit. Yeah, I noticed that. I didn't need to name any names here. Anyway. Did you just do that on purpose, Outrun? What is that? What the hell is that? I'm going to kill every mosquito in Quebec and then the drivers. Okay, good. This is the worst link. I don't even know how I can't even click on it. My man is a big link. Oh man. We should start focusing on this more than like the NFL thing even, I would say. Okay, no, please don't start filling the chat with this. Please. Okay? Please don't start filling the chat with this now. It's going to be completely illegible. Let's not do this. Oh my gosh. It's enough now. It's enough. Hey. Stop it. All right, that's enough. That's when I'm getting serious. Banning the next person that does this because Rob, definitely not because I care. That's right. It's purely for altruistic reasons. You don't have to buy me Cult of the Lamb, Marina. I appreciate that though, but I actually bought it. I did buy it. I have it. I just haven't. I don't think I've installed it yet. But I do have it. But that's a very nice offer of you, Marina. I know I should play it. I guess I just haven't really had the time, like over the rest of the summer there. When I was trying to stream and had, I was recovering from COVID and didn't have a lot of energy, didn't have a lot of time. I will play it though. I do have it. I own this game. Don't make Rob turn the stream around. We just got on the road. I will turn this goddamn stream around right now. It'll just be fun to be involved in the chat and then watch you decide which of us to execute. You got to execute people? Oh my goodness. That's going to cause controversy. Hello, Husker. Welcome. That's going to be controversial. And make them eat poop. Goodness gracious. Execute me, daddy. Oh my gosh. Can you name them in the game? Yeah, I think like Twitch chatters can like appear in the game. There's a plugin. It's got like chat functionality. I just tried to put the link that Marty posted in the chat. I just to see what it is. I just copy pasted the link and put it in, and it's like a small white square. I think I'm being hacked, actually. I think I'm being hacked. Oh yeah, sacrifices. I definitely do not execute the ugly, insubordinate cult members. Oh boy. I don't believe there's any usurpation that goes on there, G Kleppy. I don't think there's any usurping that happens in this game or in real life either. The coup is not complete. There's no coup. There's no coup happening here. Okay? It's just a joke. That's all. I think there actually is usurping. No, oh, God damn it. I don't know about this game. There is actually shit. I'm making dinner for his family. Here's the intro music going on in the basement. What in the world? Nothing is cooed here. They're a bunch of fucking amateurs. The day of the new Raw will be glorious. Again, no new Raw will be. That's just it's a really enjoyable bit that we've been doing with the community. The whole thing about this new Rob thing, not actually accurate though. Not actually accurate. So you can all rest easy. Read my lips. No new Robs. Thank you, Mr. Cypher, sir. Dark Robert. Dark Bobbert. Oh my gosh. Why would I listen to the old Rob for guidance as to what is accurate when my loyalties now lie with the new Rob? What a nice welcome back. What a nice welcome back to the stream. It's finally, the summer schedule is over. It's finished. I'm back on the regular schedule. What a nice welcome back. New Rob, who dis? In dialectics, we recognize that which is growing and gaining strength, which in this case is the new Rob. Ugh. I think a fake Rob angle would be a great premise as long as they have a cage match for the title at the end. Yeah, my streaming PC in dangling above the ring ladder match. There can be only one. I'm gonna go Highlander style on this new Rob character. I don't even care. I don't even care anymore. It's the only way of knowing which Rob is the real Rob. Exactly. I mean, listen, if I go toe to toe with the new Rob, whoever this is, with the big like one of those old broadswords, and whichever one of us has a head at the end of it, that's the real Rob. That's the way to let fate decide. Highlander is criminally underrated. Highlander is great. You know what I never understood Highlander 2. Like they did Highlander was a big success. It's kind of a fun, interesting fantasy science fiction thing in the 80s. And they did Highlander 2. And it seems like it's the script to a different movie that they just called Highlander, and it's so strange. Yeah, they just immediately kind of to expand the universe. All of a sudden Sean Connery is back in the movie. It's so bizarre. I haven't even seen it for years and years, but I just remember tonally it's just like completely different. All of a sudden it's on another planet with no explanation really, or no exposition that explains any of this the way that the universe is expanded. Highlander 2. Really kind of a weird flick. Then all the sequels ignored it. Yeah, it's just like it's like a completely different universe. It's really weird. I never saw the TV show. I never saw that one. It's like that Terminator that everyone pretends never happened. That is most of the Terminator series for me. After 2, then it's all not canon for me. Highlander 2 has superb principal antagonist Michael Ironside. I do love me some Michael Ironside, Carnoba. I haven't seen it in probably 30 years. I just remember how strange it is, how like disconnected it is from the first film, and how a lot of stuff is just like it just happens in the movie, and there's no real explanation about what is going on. Highlander 2. The Quickening. Is there a trailer? Remember when Christopher Lambert was like a big Hollywood actor? Not big, but leading man. Christopher Lambert was also in the Mortal Kombat movie. Highlander 2, a strange movie.
Somewhere in the future, a man from the past,
Find McLeod and kill him.
is all that stands between life and death.
There simply isn't enough energy on the planet to take down the shield without killing us all.
The world is dying, McLeod. The shield has to come down.
It's got some climate change crisis stuff in there.
Greetings, Highlander. You cold? Rather glad the magic works.
Like, if you're just watching this out of context, you have no fucking clue what's going on, what this movie is about, who is who, what is happening. there's no actual explanation of anything of what this movie is.
You gotta like.
Let's have some fun.
Remember, you called me. Just remember, the quickening.
It sounds like magic.
Well, it is, kind of.
Christopher Lambert, Sean Connery. Highlander 2, The Quickening.
Stuart Copeland did the soundtrack. That's kind of cool. Weird flick. Apparently, the studio and director had creative differences, so the director didn't have any input on the editing process or final cut and walked out of the premiere after 15 minutes. Yeah, I watched Highlander 1 and I'm also lost. There's really very little connection to the original one. Is Lambert French Canadian? I'm not sure. I was calling the correct pronunciation Lambert, but then they say Christopher Lambert. Christopher Lambert. Stuart Copeland from The Police, that's right, yeah. Like, I remember it's got some, like, future Earth climate change. There's, like, a shady, massive corporation, a mysterious corporation. There's some kind of shield around the Earth that it's really like in the early 90s climate stuff. Like, it's like the ozone layer. There's like a shield because that was the big concern at the time, the ozone layer, which has since been like partially or almost entirely repaired because of like specific actions we took to like to stop using certain products, certain chemicals. But it was big. It was the ozone layer was the big thing at the time. So it's all about like a shield around the Earth or something at some shady corporation. Yeah, it's some Final Fantasy VII vibes. Yeah. I think McLeod became head of the Atmospheric Repair Corporation. There we go. It's coming back to me at the beginning of the flick. He's nearing the end of his mortal life. The prize was mortality. Then Ironside and his pals come to Earth with triggers a fresh quickening and makes McLeod young again. And I guess it brings back Connery. But isn't there stuff that's happening on another planet as well? Fuck, it's confusing. It's very confusing. And you were into the TV show, Sinchal. I never saw that one. It would be a good TV format, though. The story is good for like a TV format. There were two different versions of the movie. In one, they're on a different planet, but in the other, they're just in the distant past with guns for some reason. Okay. All right. Tweet a Highlander meme. I don't know if there's a lot of Highlander memes. I guess there is. Okay, well I'll tweet that I'm live using a Highlander meme. Okay? I'll do this. Okay. All right, there we go. Tweeted that I'm live. We did it. Highlander came before memes. There's still a lot of there can be only one memes. I think that survived. That survived from the Highlander films. There can be only one. There's a lot of like I just googled Highlander meme, and there's a lot of like images from Highlander with like the impact font that says there can be only one. I saw like a racial stereotype, like a Mexican one, where the Highlander's wearing a sombrero and it says there can be only one. That was another meme that I just saw when I was looking for this. So there's a lot of versions of that. What if we did with Marina's Mexi picture? That would be a good caption for it. That's true. I'll still bet they were made post Astley. You're saying Rick Astley was the first meme. I don't know if that's accurate. I'm not so sure. Anyway, welcome back to the show, folks. We're back on the normal schedule. It's been quite a summer. I guess summer's over. It's August 30th. Technically, we got like 3 more weeks of summer, whatever it is. But technically, it's over now. Kind of depressing. I don't know how... If I was going to say how was my summer, I don't even know. It was all right. A lot of ups and downs. Pretty sick the last like 6 weeks of the summer, which was kind of depressing. It was nice. It was nice to do some I went on vacation. I had some other there were ups and downs, let's say that. I'll tell you that much. Overall, I guess it was all right. It was kind of good. There was a few good things, and there was some bad stuff as well mixed in there. Summer for me was truly a land of contrasts. It went from hot Rob summer to sick. It went from hot Rob summer to bachelor Rob summer to sick Rob summer. Sick Rob bummer. That's right. It was the best of times. It was the blurst of times. Oh, you stupid monkey. I have to go to the doctor. Goodbye. Take care, Jay. Thanks for coming by. The summer of beefs. I guess there was a few small beefs. I don't know if it would qualify as the summer of beef. There was a few minor beefs. We go to TwitchCon and full Lucha Libre style and Tombstone. Some debate bros. Jesus. There's still beef. No, there's no more. No more beef. I've told you, folks, I don't like beefing. All right? I try to avoid it. Sometimes the beef lifestyle can't help but catch up to me. Okay? I can't help it. I try to avoid this shit. I try to come on here and have fun and have a good time with everybody. And we learn things together. And we talk about important, interesting things. We have fun. I'm not looking to beef with anybody. Sometimes though, the beef lifestyle does catch up to me. And what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do about that? Some bespoke artisanal beef. There we go. Anyway, you can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Go vegan.
Electric Boot, thank you for the 4 months tier 1. I really appreciate that, Electric Boot. I don't know if that was a comment on what I was saying about beefing. I probably should, honestly. Like, I know deep down that I need to probably do that. It's so hard to move on from a lifestyle that you've kind of been brought up in and you're addicted to, right? It's hard. It's hard. I know in my heart of hearts I do need to do that, though. Having beef? As a child, my dad advised me to grab a folding chair and do my level best to wrap it around my antagonist's head, which he promised would permanently solve my problem. Yes, my dad watched a ton of pro wrestling. I mean, that is a good way. We don't promote violence, but whacking somebody with a folding chair is an efficient way of solving problems. Like, that's just the reality. That's just the reality. I do all my battling in the even though despite the slogan at the bottom of the screen, I do all my battling in the marketplace of ideas. The battlefront of ideas. That's where I get in my strongest battles and fights. I use my words. I use my words and ideas instead of a folding chair. How about that? Likes to hit them with a folding chair constructed out of praxis. That's right. An idea duel. Not a debate. It's not a debate. It's an idea duel. I think the steel chair probably wins that fight. I'm a firm believer in community-based solutions to conflicts, but if the community chooses cage match, who am I to stop them? Exactly. If that's what the community decides, I will just have to splash somebody off the top of the steel cage of ideas. Maybe an elbow drop I could do as well. Either or. As the late great Eddie Guerrero observed, cheat to win. Absolutely. That's the thing. Rather than hit my opponent with a steel chair, I'll simply smack the chair on the ground and then throw it into their hands and then pretend that I've been hit. And go, until they get disqualified by the referee. And the referee looks at them and they're holding the chair like, no. And I'm just like, look what he did. That's how I'm going to do it. Rob is undefeated in a TLC match. Tito, Lenin, and communism. Yeah. That's right. That's absolutely correct. Oh boy. What a fucking roller coaster of the last couple of weeks. An artist in the field of Little Stinker. It's true. It's true. And I believe that was his last match. That's how his last match ended, which is so perfect. It's such a fitting end for Eddie as a character. It's how his last match ended against, I believe, Mr. Kennedy. Here comes Enver Hoxha with the chair. Someone's not respecting the sacred edict of women's rights. Who's that coming out of the bunker? Who's that? Who's that coming out of the bunker? Oh my god! My god, it's Enver Hoxha! Let me see how my Highlander meme is doing. Yeah, it's all right. Slithering like a snake. Picture everybody sounds like Kane with the voice box. That was a great gimmick. Kane should have. I guess it's not really sustainable for years, but Kane should not have moved away from that. I was looking earlier actually at a video from some of Steve Austin's world title wins as well, and that old Kane costume is unbeatable, with the full body and the full face mask. I'm sure it was miserable to wrestle in. But that, plus the voice box, that was fucking great. Great NBA fantasy team name, thank you. OG Kane was the coolest shit ever. When he came and went and like ripped the door off the Hell in the Cell match, and it's just like, this is like an actual monster. This is not a human being. He was as effective as that kind of unstoppable monster, as like a Michael Myers, as a Jason, a Freddy. Like, he was but huge, like this huge, like physically dominant, terrifying person. Now he sells insurance. I thought he was isn't he a mayor? I thought he was like a mayor of like a place in Tennessee or something. He's some dipshit libertarian. I need to play a wrestling game. I want to do a tag team storyline with Che and Castro. Marina, do you want to see? I've shown this a couple times before. Do you want to see the greatest created wrestler? I have the Rob Rousseau created wrestler. The greatest created wrestler in the history of this sport. Would you like to see his intro? Let me see here. I think it's on here. Yeah, here we go. I wish I had kept more of my created wrestlers like over the years. Because I would always get wrestling games and I would always do these amazing like elaborate intros for my guys. Okay, here. Hold on. I'm going to start over from the... Okay, check this out. Everyone just booing out of the building. He thinks he's better than us. This is how people react when I talk about the U.S. Nazi alliance. This is me to all like the Destiny fans when they were in there yelling at me about this. That's good. Yeah, first 5-inch inseam, next summer wrestling panties. We'll see. Maybe I'll get there one day. I think I would maybe need to do a little conditioning first. I would need to do maybe a little bit of conditioning. Boo, the Nazi Party ceased to exist after 1945. Boo. Just got to get you on a 5x5 strong lift routine, and I got to do that cycle. If we thought it was hot Rob summer this summer, wait till I do a cycle with Marty this year. Wait till you see me next year. We're going to coordinate our cycles, and we're going to be ripped. And I'll be able to wear this kind of stuff in real life. I'm just going to go pure himbo. I'm going to forget about all this political shit. I'm going to forget about all this political stuff. I'm going to pivot to just being like a dumb himbo. And I'm just going to stream shirtless. In pools and stuff. Let's inject steroids into each other. Oh. Yeah, I'm gonna be like, no, but respectful though. I won't be a Canadian Andrew Tate. I'm not gonna change my progressive values. I'm not gonna be like, women are evil and they belong in the kitchen or anything like that. I'm not gonna say that. Maybe I'll say it a little bit. Maybe I'll just mildly suggest that. Let's review those views on women. Yeah, picture me saying this next year, but wearing wrestling underpants. And with no shirt on. I don't respect women. Their tights, their wrestling panties. I don't respect them. Does the hands to the ear. I don't respect women because they're candy ass jabronis. I'm just getting ready to pivot, folks. I'm getting ready to pivot. If you thought I was grifting before, typical Bernie supporter Rob Rousseau. If you thought I was grifting before, just wait. I'm pivoting next summer. Flicking a toothpick at the webcam. As he says, women do not, in fact, hold up half the sky. Jesus. Bonjour. Kabild. Bonjour, ça va? Just tuning in. Did I hear that Rob wants all of chat to imagine him in his underpants? That's right. Yeah, that's what I was talking about there. That is correct. Rub the commie heel, Russo. I think it would even be better if I renounced all that. I'm gonna go in the ring in my first promo after the pivot. I'm gonna pour lighter fluid and light State and Revolution on fire. When I sell and go corporate Rob. Corporate Rob. I'm gonna start wearing suits. I can't wait for post pivot. Christian crypto himbo libertarian Rousseau. There we go. There we go. I was just thinking what a brilliant turn of events it was in that late 90s when The Rock was getting so popular. When he was in Nation of Domination, regardless of whether they were supposed to be heels, was just starting to be, his charisma was just so off the charts that he was starting to be just like so super popular anyways. And it was really ready to like totally explode for him to become like the guy, like the main good guy in the company, the main baby face. And then for them in that moment to flip him to the corporate Rock immediately, like right when everyone was really ready to cheer for him and was like really ready for him to be like the number one guy. And all the good things that everyone liked, the people's elbow and stuff, he's calling it the corporate elbow, and he's talking shit to all the fans. And he's wearing those absurd shirts, those absolutely absurd shirts with the tigers on them and stuff. He was so great. Like, dude, that was just unbelievably great. And it's the only industry that's like that. When you can see that the fans want something really bad, they could see that the fans wanted it really bad, and they just like they take it away from them, and they're just like, no, you don't get it. You don't get that thing that you want. Sometimes WWE does that to like punish the fans, and sometimes they do it and it works really well like that. When my great grandma was dying, all she wanted to do was watch Batista all sweaty and glistening while in her hospital bed. It was the funniest shit. That is funny. Batista was very sweaty and glistening. It's true. It's very true. Great grandma saying her prayers every night to be Batista bombed. Apparently Batista's body is like destroyed now. I'm not surprised. I mean, it's an industry that absolutely destroys people's bodies. I mean, it's like, I think especially we're in that full-time like 300 day per year grind. Plus all the whatever drugs you're doing to sustain your physique, to stay awake, you know. There's a reason that a lot of those guys don't live past, 45. That's the thing about The Rock. That's the amazing thing about The Rock is he had that amazing career. And it was only like, in retrospect, it seems like a long time. It was only like 3 or 4 years, and then he was out. And then he was part-time after. And The Rock got bigger after being done. Yeah, absolutely. And for a while, it wasn't clear that that's what was going to happen either. Wrestling. Because they haven't discovered rain. Rain. It'll stop you dying young as a result of years of physical strain in the ring. That's right. Even Roman Reigns has not picked up on this. The sponsorship is right there, and he hasn't picked up on it. The head of the table. Rain will stop the CTE. And The Rock is going to be the next U.S. president. I don't think he's going to be the next U.S. president. I do think he probably will be the president, though. I don't think that's really an exaggeration. It's going to be John Cena versus The Rock. Thrice in a lifetime. First 2 times at WrestleMania, the 3rd time on the grandest stage of them all. United States presidential election. Took my grandma to a WWE event. She angrily explained why she hates that old lad in a thick New Brunswick accent for every heel that came out. It was glorious. That's great. I mean, it's fun. It's fun to go and boo all the heels at wrestling. It's cathartic. Cena representing the CCP, of course. Yeah. Reading the Wikipedia list for wrestlers' deaths is so sad, though. These people really kill themselves to entertain. I know. It's incredibly disturbing. There was that part. I mean, there was that period in like the 2000s when it was just like it felt like every week another wrestler was dying at the age of like 45, culminating in the whole Chris Benoit murder suicide. That really got to a point where it's like, I don't feel like I can really continue watching this anymore. This is like, obviously this is like really it's hard to be entertained by something when you know the people that are doing it are like literally like killing themselves in the process. Yeah, if Cena only addressed the crowd in Mandarin, that would be such a great gimmick. Oh my god. That would be such a great gimmick. Owen Hart, one of the best to ever do it. One of the absolute best to ever do it. Nowadays, people are learning more about how brutal their contracts are, too, because a bunch of wrestlers have tried to branch out and gotten smacked down. Yeah, well, I mean, just the whole Vince McMahon model of, like, he, like, invented the gig economy, basically. Hiring people as independent contractors so you don't have to pay them health care or benefits or anything like that. They're independent contractors who also can't work for anyone else. And you own their name and their likeness. It's like the most exploitative thing ever. But then you have a couple people that rise to the top that do really well from that system, and then you use them to keep them down. It's like the capitalist model, the libertarian capitalist model. Yeah, after cornering the market by buying out all your competitors, hostile takeover of all your competitors. Knowing how shitty things were behind the scenes too made it hard for me to want to go back to watching it. Yeah, even though I enjoy talking about it and I kind of keep track of what's going on, I'm still pretty much like a lapsed fan. I still have a hard time like getting fully back into it and invested in it. There aren't enough hours in the week. Yeah, I mean, when I was kind of back into it, when Monday Night Raw switched to 3 hours per week, I was just like, I can barely watch a 3-hour movie that I love. You know, I find that straining to watch 3 hours of Monday Night Raw each and every week of my life. Like, I was like, I can't do this. I cannot do this. Oh, you know what? I saw. Okay, I'm getting into there's a couple things that I wanted to talk about today, and now I'm remembering. There's one video I want to show you guys though before we move on. We don't need to keep going on about wrestling, or wrestling, as it were. I was just wondering if anyone had seen. I'm sure many of you have seen this.
8-year-old.
But I wanted to watch this on the stream. I say this and then watch Raw for 10 hours a week. But I'm engaging though. I'm engaging. I'm not 3 hours of Raw. Okay, we have fun. And also we interact. And we're a community and a family. And if you're not watching 10 hours a week, then what is going on with you? That's what I would want to know. Did anyone see this?
Living in Chicago. This is my weekend as a 28-year-old living in Chicago. Started my day off with a guru and making my bed. It was Mental Awareness Day at my company, so I got brunch with my friend Lizzie and had a few drinks. Then I met up with Devlin and we kayaked to the Chicago River. It was actually pretty dope. Priscilla had never been to the Field Museum, so we had to check it out. Then we headed to El Paraiso for some drinks and vibes. The tacos were scrumptious. We also got a margarita tower, so yeah. After that, I had to take my 4Runner to the shop to get a new transmission. Then I came home and just chilled a little before going to see Bill Maher at the Chicago Theater. He absolutely crushed. After the show, I met up with Lindsay Jacobellis and her sister Malmo for tequila shots and yet another Marg Tower. It was so much fun. Then we went to Rind for their stuffed pineapple, which was absolutely to die for. And their snow crab was pretty good too. Here's at Brow Brow in Tomlin Square with Jake, Ben, and Jordan. My friends are the craziest. More drinks, then we went to Rosemary for small bites, and somehow we ended up going to Medieval Times. I don't know, the rest of the night was kind of a blur. Woke up Saturday and took lunch for a waltz. We found cicada skin and I tried to get him to eat it, but he didn't. Another guru, then a much needed pork chop from the Golden Nugget. Rosie invited me to go to the Museum of Ice Cream, which was actually pretty dope. She's so precious. Then we got hungry, so I made pesto aioli to put on some Italian ogies. After a couple rounds of Zathura, we went to the world's largest Starbucks, then met up with Kedzie and Marvin at the Museum of Ice Cream, which was actually pretty dope. Got a Marg Tower, then I had a dessert date with Kara at the Museum of Ice Cream, and then we got hungry, so we grabbed a bite at Wendell's. Me and Jira had reservations at Heidsieck for their Alpana, and then got Londo at Tanta, which I highly recommend. Was pretty wiped, so then I just chilled for a few. Met up with my girlfriend Darla at Legoland, then caught a rooftop movie with her friend KP, and stopped at Target on the way to Bobo for drinks. Then stopped at Target before going to Cafe Menu on the East Loop for Georgina's 45th. I got the number 6, which includes pizza, salad, stir fry, and pasta, which I highly recommend. Tyler had an acoustic set at the Plunge Hole, so I stopped by that, and then went to Ben's performance at a dope garage in Roscoe Village. Then it was time for dinner at D'Angelo's, where you have to get the cheeseburger egg rolls and hummus and tacos. I got us a pair of Marg Towers at Itola 1-1 in Lincoln Park, and then I had a beautiful drive home. I spent the night teaching guitar online and then watched Trumbo for like the billionth time. Woke up on Sunday and hit TJ's in Pilsen with Allison Peckler. My wife and husband thought it'd be a good day for a hike, so we did that. After that, I ranked every girl I know on a scale of 1 to 10 and wrote apology letters to the sub-4s. Yet another Marg Tower. Went on a hike with Aaron, then Friendsgiving at Lena's condo, and we played some VR and made hot dogs and saw a comedy show and made some of my famous aioli. Then I guess that was my weekend.
So, my question for you, my question for the chat is: at what point did you realize that was a bit? Because like, I was watching this video and it took me so long to realize like what was going on. Like, not until it starts to like hyper accelerate around the second Marg Tower. It took me so long. It was the second Marg Tower. I was still on board. There's the floating dog, but it's barely, you can barely see it. I think I realized that like there's like an extra dinner in there. Yeah, and the all the alcohol, and then going to 4Runner, getting a transmission, and then the Bill Maher. That's 30 seconds in. I still didn't get it at here, though, the first time I watched it. When it got to Bill Maher, I was like, fuck, I hate these people so much. I hate these people. The museums of ice cream, they just keep going back. I was still not realizing. It was yeah, I was still all the way on board with this. At Medieval Times and all this stuff. And yeah, here's the thing with the dog. Look at the dog. Watch this.
But he didn't. Another guru.
Did you see that? The dog's just floating. Oh. Yeah, the bar mitt was clear bait. Of course it was. But I really didn't. The first time I did not get it. Dogs in Chicago float. Okay, that's the thing that happens. I got suspicious when I saw Museum of Ice Cream. My instincts told me there was something sus. When he returns to the museum, when you go multiple times to the Museum of Ice Cream, it starts to accelerate. And that was only the time that I was like, oh, okay. I get what's going on here. But it took me a really long time to figure it out. Because there really is a lot of these videos. It's like, that's why this this is so effective, because there are so many of these like detestable millennial tech worker videos that are like this. The hot dogs at the end, just whipping the hot dog into the water. Man, it really took me a long time to figure this out. Yeah, I was always, I think, even the pineapple and the snow crab. There's the Museum of Ice Cream. Then they get more stuff. Then they get, I think there was 2 dinners there, and that's when I started to, and then it starts to accelerate. And I'm like, okay, I see what's happening here. I get it. I see what's, but it took me at least about a minute to figure this out. The floating dog is so funny. Oh my gosh. I saw one that was not a joke where the girl literally flies to Italy at the end and the video is titled A Day in the Life. Yeah, no, there's really a lot of videos like this that are completely serious. I can barely make it through the 3 things I have to do in a day. I somewhat used to live a kind of like hipstery lifestyle. But never anything like approaching that. I certainly used to have a lot more energy, but now the idea of doing more than one activity in a day is like unthinkable to me. If someone was like, "Hey, do you want to go to a restaurant and then go to do this thing after?" I'd be like, "No. I'll do one of those things. How about that? I will do one of those things. We can go to the restaurant and we can go our separate ways afterwards, or we can do the other thing." Hipster Rob exposed. I was a little bit like that. Not as much with the restaurants though. Not as much to the same extent. I was more of a working class kind of salt of the earth hipster. Okay? And roll up the sleeves, grab your lunch pail, vagabond hipster lifestyle. More. It was a lot of art openings though. A lot of like Vice parties. A lot of 80s nights at the Jupiter Room or whatever, or Korova Milk Bar, or Copacabana, or Biff Tech. Any of those places. Showing up, going to lofts, stopping by Main Diner at 1 a.m., going to a random loft party. I was about that life. I admit that I was about that life. How many of these have follow-ups that the person is laid out with long COVID? Yeah, seriously. Yeah. Me leaving my apartment is hard enough as it is. Yeah, like Outrun said, bowling and dinner. I think like maybe I could be convinced to do like 2 things, 2 activities. If it was with people that I was really interested in seeing, but I would take a whole weekend to recover from that though. If I went to dinner and a movie, that would be one thing. Dinner and bowling though, which would probably include drinking after. I would be out of commission for 2-3 days after that minimum. Easily. Dinner before a movie makes sense because a movie you're still just like sitting there, right? You're not really doing much. You're just kind of like passively engaging in something. I mean, even the other day when I went out last week, I went to the park and had a beer or 2 in the park, and then went after to a pub and sat on the terrace at the bar. Even that for me was a lot. I went to way too many art openings before realizing I want to see the art without the assholes. Now I just go on regular days. Yeah, it's that. I was always a little alienated by that lifestyle, but I was just part of those. I was part of those social circles, so I would always end up at those things. That's right. I went to the TRRS, folks. It was lovely. It was lovely. And in fact, I would hope that any one of you could come visit me one day in Montreal, and we'll go out to a nice terrace and have a wonderful time. Okay? And I will set aside all my misgivings about going out and doing stuff. For this one day, for this one special day. Clueless, I said, did long-term moving to Quebec, but if everyone says it that way, there's no chance in hell. You can get used to it, okay? You can get used to it. More of you should come here and keep me company. I've been a COVID shut-in for 3 years and just had a weekend away with a group of like 15 friends. And my entire brain and body could not cope. Doing thing, going places, talking with people. What is this? Yeah. I've been mostly... I mean, I was already kind of a shut-in before. So COVID really just like reinforced a lot of the shut-in behavior. I've gone out like a handful of times. It was definitely nice to go out the other day. I was, especially after having COVID... It was just being stuck in my house and not going anywhere and feeling really bad. It was nice to be able to go to the other side of town and like see some people and sit in a park and stuff. Like that was genuinely kind of mentally helpful. Come to Montreal and go to a TRRS. Did I hear that correctly? No, you did not. His work remote from Rob's basement. We can all pile in here. Let's all pile it in. Or if we could move to Ottawa, which is like those places but worse. I would not, Sean. I know you're not out here trying to sell people on moving to Ottawa. You don't do people in the community like that. Okay? Don't do people in the community like that. Genuinely, Montreal is a really great city. It's one of the best cities, I think. I know everyone thinks that about the place they live, but you know, it's like, and Quebec City is more like Europe, but it's going to Europe is pretty far depending on where you are in the States, right? But it's like it's pretty easy to go to Quebec and come up to Montreal, and it's like it's a totally different vibe from really anywhere on the continent. I'm not going to say anything. Did you have a bad Montreal experience, Marina? Or about Ottawa?
You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
You know what I need to do? I keep on telling myself this and I forget. Alert box. Make that smaller. So big. Thank you, Alana, for gifting a sub. I really appreciate that. I know about moving to Ottawa. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to discourage anyone that has genuine plans about this, but even living in Eastern Ontario, Montreal is very different. I know. I grew up in Eastern Ontario. I want to go to Quebec. I could drive there easily. It's a really interesting, like, even if you just go for a visit, it's a really interesting place. It was really cool a couple weeks ago, and I went to see Oliver Stone. It was like if Indianapolis was built by Harry Potter wizards. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness gracious. Ottawa will never recover from this. Do you guys mind if I just like... I missed a call from Momo's groomer. Just 1 sec, okay? Talk amongst yourselves for 1 sec. 3 new voice. Should have just deleted. Just 1 sec. I'm going to mute you if I have to say anything incriminating. Hello. Hi, I'm just returning your call. I called this weekend about a grooming appointment for Momo. It's Rob at, yeah. Ooh, you know what? Yes. I think I can do that. 5:45. Okay. Yeah, I think I can make it. 5:45. Okay, got it. Okay, great. I'll see you then. Okay. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. We're getting her in today, folks. We're getting her in today. 5:45. Gonna bring Momo for a little grooming appointment. She's going to get the lion cut, which is good because she's a fucking mess. I don't want to get into the details again. We don't need to get into the details about what's going on back there. It's not good though. It's not a good situation, and she's not happy about it. And frankly, I don't blame her. That was easy. Yeah, usually I have to wait like a couple weeks, but they had just had a cancellation today. Now I'm not forcing them to stay and open an extra 45 minutes. Well, it's exciting look into Rob's personal life. Again, this is the really hot, exciting lifestyle that I got going on over here. It is late for a groomer appointment. I agree, but I don't know. I was expecting to have to wait a couple weeks, but we got her in there. We did it. We did it, chat. We did it. And I will post pics. When I get Momo's lion cut, I will post a pic in the pet pics section of the Discord server. Poor Momo catching strays. I bet you a dollar that poor groomer doesn't know she just signed up for a cat instead of a dog. No, Momo's got a file there, and it's specifically a cat place. It's a cat. It's called toilettage félinus. Momo going to Vidal says so. Just gonna go to those the hair dryer things. The curlers, the whole 9 yards. Just doxed Momo's groomer. I guess I shouldn't. One of you weirdos is going to show up. Try to stab me or something. I'm going to get stabbed bringing my cat to a groomer appointment. One of the weirdos that follows this channel. Not you, of course. You're very nice and totally normal and well-adjusted. You know who I'm talking about, though. Too bad French isn't real, and so far as I'm concerned, it doesn't exist. I think that's a good way of looking at it. That is a good way of looking at it. Oh boy. Okay, that was exciting. It was pretty exciting. It would be a rather noteworthy demise. Yes, it would. New Rob sends their regards. Oh no. Oh no. You know what? I'll take it. I'll take it. If that's how I have to go, I'll take it. Remember, chat, 5:45 at the Toilettage Finin for the meetup. No, there's no meetup. We will do a meetup one day, okay? We'll do a meetup one of these days. But today is not that day. I guess I should talk about something, right? Something like important other than this, other than shaving my cat, which is not some kind of code word. It's just like a legitimate thing that I have to get done today. I guess I tried to be showing up with a 25-person entourage to get the cat shaved. I tried to be responsible today, and I've been putting off doing tax stuff. And tax stuff for me is historically, especially with the ADHD stuff, tax stuff has been always really, really difficult. I had a couple of years where I just like completely ignored the idea that taxes exist. And I was getting always the notices about stuff and I was just like, not going to look at that. And you just put it into the pile of stuff that you don't want to think about or engage with in any way. Historically, I've had a lot of issues with this that didn't need to be as like stressful, but I make them more stressful by not dealing with it. Since I've been kind of better at catching up on that kind of stuff, I have a mental block with taxes and paperwork. It can be very tricky. But it ended up causing, it was like this whole stressful thing for like 8 years for me that I was always stressed out about. So eventually I realized that kind of basic lesson. It's like, oh, if I just do this thing that I don't want to do, then I will not have to be stressed about it for years and years. You know, that kind of mental calculation that you have to do sometimes. So, I do my taxes on time each year now. I pay a guy $100 to do my returns and I get $1,000+ back each year. Well, that's the issue though, is that because I'm self-employed, I don't get any back. And because I'm being paid on a month-by-month basis and I have to pay into like it's not Social Security, but it's like a pension. There's a Quebec like a provincial pension fund that you got to pay into. So I end up owing quite a lot at the end of the year because I'm not paying any of that shit on a month-by-month basis. So I had like a somewhat sizable tax bill, and today starting to get letters about it. They're already like increasing the amount because I'm not responding to it and I haven't dealt with it. So today I just looked into paying it, and I was going to like do a whole thing where I did the payment for the rest of the year. I know the pension is going to disappear once the U.S. invades during the water wars. I know that, Squatch Drew. I know that in the future Mad Max world, when I need this pension, it will not be there. I've just accepted that. I've just accepted that this money is just going. I'm just paying this money so people don't come and like bother me, basically. That's what I'm paying for. That's the service that I'm paying for. So I was going to set up a thing where I just paid like monthly over the rest of the year, but like I had a little bit of money built up this morning, and I was just like, I just kind of held my nose and was like, you know what, fuck it. I just paid my entire tax bill this morning, which paid what pretty much like all the money that I had in the bank account, which is another thing. It's probably more complicated to do that, but just like, I was like, I'm just going to pay this big amount now, and just, I will not have to think about it. I don't have to think about it. It's finished. I don't have to think about doing anything on a monthly basis or making sure I have X amount of money in my account at this time. Who knows what's going to be going on in November or December? I don't know. I have no fucking idea whether I'm going to be in the same position then or that I am now. No clue. So I was almost just like, fuck it. I'm just going to pay this big tax bill, and it was somewhat painful to do, but now I feel kind of responsible because I had put it off for, 7-8 months already out of the year. I had put it off. So I was just like, I'm just going to get this out of the way and not think about it anymore for the rest of the year. Always take the smaller payments. The system is called capitalism for a reason. Better to have capital. Well, I agree. Yeah, but I didn't want them to. They're just going to hassle me. They're going to keep hassling me.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob.
Do you own your own housing?
All this.
Do you own your own housing? Was curious how which was Twitch self-employment bracket stuff. No, I don't. We rent. Our housing. And I am able to deduct a bunch of stuff like my home office stuff and like internet bill and phone bill, and I'm able to deduct a lot of that stuff, but it was still like a painful morning today as I just like bit the bullet and just like sent all the money that I had to the Quebec government. Kijiji, thank you for the gifted tier. What's up, dude? Canada Revenue Agency. Thank you. I've given them everything I have in my bank account, and now they're getting gift subs as well. There we go. it's so much less painful to have an employer yoink it for you. Yeah, it's true. It's just like I would rather not ever see that, you know? I would rather not ever have to see that. I still don't even know if that was the right decision. I honestly don't. I probably should have just set up a couple of smaller payments, but I was just like, I don't want to think about this again. I don't want to think about it. Just take my money and just leave me alone. It's done. Yeah, that's right. Although I still have federal. I still have federal, which I have not even engaged with whatsoever. But it's something. My employer is in BC and I'm in Ontario, so I have it yoinked and still have a tax bill at the end of the year because our provincial taxes are higher. It's a bad way of doing things. That is a bad way of doing things. Ugh. Quite painful though. Quite painful. Again, especially when I know I know for sure that I will not be taking advantage of that pension fund when I'm in my 60s or whatever or 70s. It's annoying that they don't put municipal, state, and federal together. What the fuck? It's all one country. Just work it out. I know. It is annoying. It's very annoying. Texas doesn't have income tax, but you got to live in Texas. I'm gonna come down to Austin. I'm gonna become an Austin guy. I think I would fit in. I would fit in as an Austin guy. Himbo Rob, I heard you were considering a pivot. I was until I see that the username was taken. Rob on the next JRE, that's right. I'm going to sell Joe Rogan on the dialectical materialist principles of Marxism-Leninism. Going to be hard to stream when the power goes out. That is true. Yeah. That is very true. He'll just nod and say, man, that stuff's wild. Austin isn't what it used to be. It'd have to make a lot of money to even consider moving there. Yeah, well, the class, like the whole gentrification thing and like the tech companies all moving there. I've just, whatever was interesting about Austin, I'm sure has been snuffed out pretty efficiently and thoroughly by now. I remember when I was in Austin, in 2008 or whatever. It was wonderful. I had a great time. Juche Pill Joe Rogan. That's right. I think I could do it. I think I could speak Joe Rogan's language. If I ever got that invite, I think I could sell him on a whole bunch of stuff. And get him all doped up. I could sell him all kinds of this good shit. Anyway, let's look at a maybe let's look at a video or something. We've been chit-chatting a while. Bring Joe some BLLs. I would love to have a nice crisp BLL in the JRE studio. What's going on in Iraq? That's a great question. In fact, I think that's something we need to explore. I'm not going to speak authoritatively on it, but that is something we need to be paying attention to. Again, I'm going to go through my go-to breakthrough news. I'm sure they're at the very least working on something about this. can you write off rain and BLL on your taxes? They are a key part of the show. You know what? I think I could. I'm going to write off a lot of the clothes that I purchased because, I'm a public facing media figure. If I'm buying wacky shirts to wear in my stream or buying TRRS merch, that's a business expense. I'm going to be expensing all this stuff this year. All the hoodies, all that stuff. It's wardrobe. That's right. Write off everything. I'm going to write off so much shit. You don't even know. I kind of need a new laptop, which I was considering buying with that excess money that I had, which is now not an option. No, I write off all the computer stuff. All that stuff. I'm going to be doing the George Costanza thing. You just write it off. If you had a cooking segment, you can deduct your groceries. It's kind of interesting. Just checking around for some videos because I would really like to watch a video from a trusted source on this Iraq thing so you can have some more context. But I don't want to just watch anything. I certainly don't want to watch Western coverage of it. Iraqi parliament broke down because the biggest party who got the most votes got the least share of seats, and its leader and supporters have been causing a ruckus since June, and they had elections last October. They got their wish and pushed the president out. Now shit is in limbo. Yeah, but it seems like it's really escalating and spiraling into like kind of madness. Democracy Now! Had some terrible takes on it this morning. Sad to see how far they've fallen. Yeah, I still think they can be good sometimes. They still have some good guests to come on Democracy Now!, but they have been kind of compromised, haven't they? You could deduct all the great workout equipment you might need as you join the Himbo caucus. I'm going to deduct all the HGH I'm going to be doing. That's a business expense. If I'm purchasing human growth hormone, so I get ripped for not even for my benefit, for your benefit. That's a business expense. Getting that Ford Foundation money messed things up for DN. It's funny how that works, isn't it? It seems to be a common thread. Once that NGO money starts coming in, lo and behold, it changes the coverage. And all your protein powder and bulletproof coffee. Correct. Have we talked? Yeah, we did talk about Pakistan a little bit. The flooding is like absolutely ludicrous. We talked the other day about China and Pakistan. How it's like some world historic climate crisis disasters happening in Pakistan and China. And what's cool is you see China reaching out to Pakistan and being like, what do you need? And we're going to help you. What do you need? I know there was some concern following the ouster of is it Imran Khan in Pakistan about what that was going to change about their relationship with China. But it does still seem like they do have, even with the new unelected government, they do have still kind of a relationship. And China's been like talking about helping them with their flood relief and everything like that. Love this free press we have. A CNN had why does it still say hello? I might as well at least change that. It's been an hour and a half. 30 million displaced by flooding. Like, that's absolutely ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. The footage of it is just terrifying, too. I can't wait to start my stream with my buddy while we're going to go over Inventing Reality as the first book we go over. I really would love to get a copy of Inventing Reality. I really want to get the book, but it's really hard to find. When I look online, there's only like used copies for like hundreds of dollars. You were waiting for me to pop in, Rob. Thanks. Hello, robbers. You're welcome, Knives. No problem. No problem at all. I'm just looking at some stories possibly about Iraq. It's just, again, I'm really trying to find something from one of our, a more trusted source that's not filtered through that Western lens. There's plenty of stuff kind of like that's in that respect. I just got here. Knifes is here. The stream can start. Well, thank you, G-Club, and Knifes, because I've been Stalin big time. I've been Joseph Stalin over here. So I'm happy that you're both here. Now we can get going. I found mine used for $90. Wow. There is a bookstore near here that I feel like I want to go check out. I feel like it could be there. This stream is primed and ready. Correct. And Matt's here as well. Everyone's showing up. Everyone's showing because I usually have been starting the stream at 2 at the latest or at the earliest, or 3 a.m. Pyongyang time, and I'm back to the 1 a.m. Pyongyang time now. I get to watch on my lunch break. I'm happy to hear that. God. I get to watch on my lunch break. I'm happy to hear that weenus of lore. What do you got going for lunch? Oh, Baldwin's Ghost, all the stuff about Solomon Islands is very cool, isn't it? It's so funny how Solomon Islands are this independent nation, are like, we want to have more of a security relationship with China. And you have Australia being like, no, that doesn't work for us, mate. And they're just like, what does Australia have to do with this? And now Solomon Islands telling the U.S. is suspending all Navy ships from entering its ports. It's too long. Too long of a title. Oh, here's Rania talking about the conflict last week. That's great, Matt. We can take a look at this. We can take a look at Solomon Islands stuff, and we can take a look at Ukraine stuff.
The political crisis in Iraq is escalating, with the country no closer to getting a government. On the one hand, the followers of Shia cleric Muqtada al-Sadr have been staging regular protests after they stormed into parliament a few weeks ago. On the other hand, the other major parties have been holding negotiations to find a way out of the deadlock. Sadr has refused to take part in them. Iraq's political parties have been unable to form a government since the election in October 2021. Muqtada al-Sadr, who was in pole position, lost his advantage.
It's weird, too, because I thought since the United States installed this kind of like Western style liberal parliamentary democracy at gunpoint, I thought that was like the most efficient, most democratic way of doing things. And here we are, and we're seeing the Iraqi parliament trying to like legislate, trying to form government. It doesn't seem quite as effective. Oddly enough, it doesn't seem like we can just take this system and just kind of like force it into place and imagine that it's going to all of a sudden this vibrant, flourishing democracy is going to spring up. I never know what to believe when the media says Iranian backed. Well, me too, and I've talked about that a lot lately, right? It's like that's just the excuse to like whatever. If you want to do more drone strikes, you want to arm proxies. Well, you got Iranian backed proxies there, so not much we can do. Our hands are tied. Exact same as with Ukraine. I know it's not good to arm and fund these right wing militias, but you got some Russian backed proxies there, so nothing we can really do. I guess we just have to. We're just forced to do it. Sadr and his supporters heavily disapprove of the Iranians, even more so than the Americans occupying them. Sadr also talks largely about the corruption in his country from the West, more so how the Iraqi Poles are corrupt. Big surprise. Their government buildings don't have tanks aimed at them. I wonder when they're trying to get policy done so rapidly. Yeah. And it does feel the same way how Soviet-backed was used in the Cold War. Of course. It's just the excuse for whatever you want to do. We have to arm these death squads in El Salvador, of course. We can't let these Soviet-backed revolutionaries win, so. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, we don't want to just take with little knowledge or understanding of the context with Iraq right now. I mean, it's hard to like make any kind of a judgment about who's about like who's the good guy in this scenario, or if that even exists. You do always just love to see American diplomats fleeing and getting their ass out of there with angry mobs chasing them out. I mean, that's always just, regardless of who the mobs are, that's always there's always a certain satisfaction to that. Sadr has also worked with Israel and has even pleased Zionists by having supporters target celebrations of Soleimani's life in Iraq. I see.
After instructing his supporters to resign from
That's
parliament.
not good.
What positions have key political players taken in Iraq? What are the possible ways out of the deadlock? Rania Khalik of Breakthrough News explains.
So when I last talked to you about Iraq, it was after the mass resignation of over 70 members of parliament that was ordered by the radical populist Shia cleric Muqtada Sadr. And Sadr did this after failing to establish a government, even though he won the largest parliamentary bloc in last year's elections. So rather than seek a compromise with his Shia rivals, he basically just picked up his ball and left the playground, if you will. So for some background on all of this, Muqtada Sadr inherited a movement of Shia followers from his father, this respected Shia cleric who was, of course, killed by Saddam Hussein. And Sadr's militia opposed the American occupation, which is what many people remember him for. And he played a key role in the sectarian civil war against Sunnis in Iraq after the US invasion and occupation. And, Sadr was like this nationalist who rejected the occupation, but it's important to remember that he is also a religious extremist and leads the country's biggest militia. Now, some Americans who used to hate him when he fought the Americans started to like him when he began to be perceived as being anti-Iranian, which happened in recent years. And he even started taking money from the Saudis and the Emiratis. But this didn't actually buy his loyalty. And fundamentally, what Muqtada Sadr wants, he wants money, he wants power, he doesn't have a clear ideology, he's really not serving any particular agenda but his own. And it's important to recognize and remember that. Now, his Shia rivals are a collection of parties that are in this coalition called the Coordination Frame, or the Frame. And they include allies of Iran who are close to the resistance and who represent the paramilitary groups who helped defeat ISIS and then clashed with the Trump administration. And these are the groups that you'll often hear in American media being referred to as Shia militias, or pro-Iranian Shia militias, or Iranian-backed Shia militias. Now, Sadr, back to the Muqtada Sadr situation, Sadr had proposed his cousin as prime minister, but he failed to get enough Kurds and Sunnis and Shias to form a government. So the frame proposed this technocrat and former minister, but the session of parliament in which he would have been elected was obstructed after Sadr ordered thousands of his followers to protest outside of the green zone where the government is. And they then, of course, breached its walls and occupied the parliament, which received a lot of media attention in recent weeks. And this naturally provoked Sadr's Shia rivals, who viewed this as totally outrageous. You know, he tried and failed to form a government, and then he stupidly ordered his members of parliament to resign. And then when his political rivals were set to establish a government, he physically blocked parliament and threatened to essentially start a civil war. That's how they see it. But in Iraq, it's taboo for Shias to shed each other's blood. And so Muqtada Sadr had hoped to turn it into like a popular uprising, right? And attract the support of outside parties and movements and activists and tribes. But then he failed at doing that. And then, you know, even his own supporters didn't really seem to understand why they were occupying parliament. Now, for months, members of the resistance factions have been predicting that interim prime minister and America's darling, Mustafa Kadhimi, would find a way to extend his premiership thanks to some expected provocation by Muqtada Sadr. And now, while this would be unconstitutional, it does turn out to not have been so crazy. So to have predicted that, Sadr's supporters could not have breached parliament peacefully without a kind of like red carpet that Kadhimi practically laid out for them. It was clear that Kadhimi collaborated with Sadr to allow the rioters to seize parliament. And Sadr made it clear that he was against the political process, and the frame accused him of wanting to do a coup. So Sadr threatened to have his protesters surround the Iraqi judiciary, which was basically like a bridge too far for the frame. So the frame ordered a counter protest and threatened to surround Kadhimi's house and expel him from Iraq if he didn't make it clear that he was just an interim prime minister only and not part of a coup attempt. Now, Kadhimi managed to get the Sadrists out of parliament, and the frame protests avoided a direct clash with the Sadrists, and they didn't enter parliament. And then the PMF, the Popular Mobilization Forces, helped secure parliament. So luckily, there wasn't an eruption of any kind of civil war. And then Kadhimi called for dialogue to like resolve the crisis. But Muqtada Sadr so far has rejected this and seems to change his mind, you know, really every day about what he wants. It's hard.
It's infuriating that you'll never hear even this level of basic analysis of Iraqi politics on any corporate news channel. They don't even speak about Iraqis like they're people with agency. It's appalling. Yeah, if anything, it's like you hear about the civil war and the conflict that's happened in Iraq and the chaos. And rather than like the causes of that being examined in any way, or talk about how there's a direct connection to U.S. involvement in Iraq, not even since the war, but for decades, or, you know, for extremely long time. And if anything, this news stories about the chaos and war and fighting that's going on in Iraq is just used an example of like, well, this is some like barbaric country that we tried to bring civilization to, and they just wouldn't accept it because it's just they're genetically just predisposed to this kind of, and it's like the role that America played in literally causing and creating every iota of that chaos, you know, going back decades, like even before the invasion and the installation of Saddam in the first place, and arming and funding Saddam in the first place in the 80s to fight against Iran and to murder communists, you know, similar to Ukraine, or similar to a number of other countries. The role that Western imperialism has played for decades and decades creating this kind of chaos is never examined. And if anything, the chaos and the violence is used for more justification for more intervention. You know, it's really sick the way that this works out. You may relax. The doctor's in, ready to diagnose your geopolitical woes. Thank you, Dr. Maggot. I'm glad you're here. Everyone's here now. All the stragglers are in. And again, remember to the stragglers, I know the schedule has been weird and different for this summer, but I am back on the non-summer schedule now. I will be starting the stream every single day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern. That's 1 a.m. Pyongyang time. The media isn't invested in understanding these conflicts because they know they're implicated in this and many conflicts around the world. That's the really sick thing as well, right? It's the way that the role that the media played in manufacturing consent for the Iraq War in the first place, and then of course don't examine the United States' culpability in that, or their very own culpability. Let's go, stragglers. School's in session, and I probably could use a doctor right now, especially a brain doctor. A real bad brain right now, folks. They caused Iran to become a theocracy as well by supporting the Shah and then the Khomeinis after the overthrow of the Shah. Yeah, it's just never ending. It's not just Iraq. It's like it's all of the Middle East and all of Africa and all of Eastern Europe. And what we're living in right now is the result of that. Or inventing reality, if you will. That's right. My dog ate my gift subs. And I'll just briefly remind everyone, almost 2 hours in, we got 3 subs. I'll just remind everyone that if you do want to subscribe to this channel, I encourage you to do so. It is $5 per month, or you can do so completely free of charge with your Amazon Prime account. Use that to convert that to a Prime sub free of charge, or you can gift subscriptions if you're feeling generous, or gift friend coin. Every little bit helps, and I appreciate it a lot. Operation Eternal Blowback. That's what it is. Let me continue this video.
Hard to keep up. Souther was demanding early elections, which he really has no right to do since he chose to resign. But the Frame had also called for new elections anyway last year when they were outraged about what they were saying was election fraud, which cost them the largest block in Parliament. You can count on me. You're going to
have good old
so
Rob
as a result, the
to
Frame
talk you
actually
through all
agreed.
this.
But early elections
Thank
in
you,
Iraq
Dr. Maggot.
still require a new government to preside
Thank you for the gifted sub. Very much appreciated.
So Souther, he opposes
every
this
sub
as well,
buys more
and he
creatine and G
fears,
Fuel for Rip
rightly,
Rob.
I think,
Correct.
that this new government would mean his men throughout the system, like in ministries and institutions, including the head of the prime minister's office, would all be removed, and therefore he would lose his control over much of the government and his access to resources. It's important to remember that Iraqi political parties, view the government as this kind of like cash cow that they can milk or bleed for their own profit.
Oh yeah, we got Rip Rob incoming. Himbo Rob, that's right.
And that's essentially how it functions. And also there's this element of Iranians and Lebanese Hezbollah officials having intervened to help de-escalate the situation and find common ground between the rival Shia parties, because they, of course, fear a collapse of the order in Iraq, which is really in nobody's interest. And the consensus-based nature of Iraqi politics means that there will eventually be a government established, but in the meantime, none of the parties is really in a rush. Prime Minister Kadhimi is content to stay in power so he can, steal, as everybody who has a position in the government does.
It's kind of weird how, especially again, when
you've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
Squatch Drew. Squatch, thank you so much for 5 gifted subs. Squatch, thank you very much. I really, really appreciate that. Very, very kind of you. Food pizza chef superstar. Celeb pizza chef superstar, Squatch Drew. I really appreciate that. No, but it's weird also how, this long pattern of America or, Western imperialism. America is the head of that snake, obviously, but Western imperialism destabilizing and overthrowing these governments, whether it's Iraq, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Libya, many, many examples of this, many such cases. And inevitably just turns into this corrupt, this completely corrupt system where you have a bunch of warlords and people that come together to just in this chaos, in this power vacuum, to just take full advantage for their own personal benefit. And it seems like this level of corruption just always seems to follow these nation building projects or these democracy bringing projects. Immediately corruption always follows. And Ukraine is a perfect example as well, one of those corrupt countries in Europe. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm back from the doctor's office. Happy to have you back, Jay. Government gridlock, accusations of election theft, a leader inciting his supporters to storm parliament. Sounds a bit like USA did a too good job of replicating their political system. But what do we say when imperialism comes home, right? There's a little bit something to that, isn't there? Because now America's own government is starting to resemble a lot of these corrupt governments that they've put in place in these failed states. That is strange. I'm sure there's a reasonable and plausible explanation for that to have happened over and over and over again. Exactly. We can get a better pause screen, and in fact, I will continue the video.
And the parties are content to have a weak prime minister like him so that they can steal and have their way. And then, of course, at the end of the day, the poor masses in Iraq have very little to say over their fate. And one thing Iraqis, though, did notice was the silence of the American establishment over the occupation of parliament by rioters intent on, obstructing the political process or even overthrowing the system, and how this differs from the hysteria in America over January 6th. That's been a conversation in Iraq, and of course has led to some conspiracies about were the Americans behind the riot. The Americans, there's a belief that maybe the Americans and the Saudis are really behind everything Muqtada Sadr does. So that's always an element whenever this happens. But for now, we'll just have to wait and see. But it does seem likely that in the meantime, there will be a process to somewhat resolve this and move towards early elections.
That was great. Obviously, like we were saying, like Ronnie, like that was such a great, more nuanced and in-depth explanation of what is going on in Iraq than we're ever going to get watching any kind of Western outlet about this. Yes, Sadr is very similar to Trump in many ways. Very strong popularity in specific cities. He calls out corruption and demands those who are ruining Iraq will pay, when largely his ideology is based off which can get him control power. So it really is like describing him as like a populist, I think it seems pretty accurate. Hey, Iron, what's going on? Yeah, definitely a way more interesting and insightful explanation of what is going on here, which Rania is always really good for. Yeah, like how she talks normal and not like a failed actor on TV. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Rania is one of the best at communicating these complex geopolitical concepts to people. Very true. I think it's probably a good way to pivot into talking about, I've been wanting to watch this for a while now, this Vijay Prashad video. It's from 2 weeks ago, but I think it's a good way to pivot into, we're talking about Iraq, and then we can watch this clip with Vijay Prashad about how the way that NATO right now is expanding into Africa and how that relates to Ukraine as well. This is the other thing we were talking about, like when we watched the clip yesterday, talking about how the gangster state and how America is now going to Africa and getting lecturing them. You must support us on Ukraine. You must back us on Ukraine. And all these African countries are just like, we don't think we will do that. Actually, I don't think we will be doing that. Which is a really interesting kind of seismic shift. That's not something that we've seen really in our lifetimes. The ability for Africa to openly undermine the U.S. like that. Position was not really tenable. And a lot has changed over the last couple of years. I'm glad we still have some good anti-imperialist voices out there that have been suckered by the Pat Soaks. Yeah, me too. Yeah, friend of the stream, Vijay Prashad. So let's watch this. I think this is a good thing to watch. It's an hour long. We'll try to make it through it. I'll put it on slightly faster playback. I have to go at 3:45. It's my kid's first day back at school. I want to make sure I pick him up in time. I'm a little nervous about it, He seemed like he was okay this morning, but he was not thrilled. You could tell when we dropped him off. He was not thrilled about it. So I want to make sure that I get him at the proper time. We'll watch this and we'll see how much time we have left after this.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rania Kalik, and this is Dispatches. We know that NATO expansion provoked the war in Ukraine, but surrounding Russia isn't NATO's only pursuit. NATO participated in the U.S. war on terror in Afghanistan. NATO destroyed Libya. And today, NATO is trying to expand into Africa. This comes as the U.S. is drawing a line in the sand and demanding that countries in the global south pick a side. You're either with the West and its never-ending wars to maintain global hegemony, or you're with Russia and China. And
thanks for that tweet, comment, social distancing. We'll make sure to check that out after we take a look at this. I have a couple things to look at after. You want me to tell VJ you said hello tonight? Yes, tell him I said hello if you can. I would appreciate that. We know we're tight, so he's gonna know. Yeah, the LaRoucheite infiltration. It's almost like fucking clockwork, isn't it? Biden is an anti-war president is the lib version of calling Trump a dove. Wrong on both counts, and there's a lot of people getting that wrong right now. Let's take a look at this clip. I'm just going to get some water too.
Those who choose wrong or stay neutral are being propagandized, bullied, and threatened with sanctions, no more so than countries in Africa. To help break it all down, I'm joined by Vijay Prashad, Executive Director of the Tricontinental Institute for Social Research and author of many books, including Washington Bullets, A History of the CIA, Coups, and Assassinations. Vijay, welcome.
Thanks a lot. Great to be with you.
It's always so good to have you on. And I should add, you actually have a book that you just finished publishing with Noam Chomsky. If you want to shout that out real quick, remind me of the title, because I didn't.
The book is called The Withdrawal, and it's about the U.S. wars. Actually, it's pertinent to our conversation. It's about U.S. wars and withdrawal from.
You know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna reach out to VJ again and see if I can get him and Noam to come talk to us on the show. Fuck it. Why not? Why not? Why not try to get VJ and Noam Chomsky on the show? Why not just swing for the fences? I'm doing it.
From Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. And I think the Libya story is the one that perhaps is pertinent for us, given that this was a NATO operation on African soil.
Right. And we're going to get to that. But, first, Vijay, I think people have heard so much about NATO. There's been like an endless stream of content about it since the war in Ukraine began, especially, which is great. But just like as a quick reminder to people, and then for those who maybe aren't familiar,
I will ask Noam about
Goat Show. The issue of NATO and Africa. Can you walk us through a brief history of NATO in general, like who founded it and why was it founded? And then we can go from there.
Well, after World War II, the United States was seeking a kind of global force projection around particularly the Soviet Union, and then after 1949, the People's Republic of China. So the United States operated to build a set of treaty organizations. In 1949, the first of these treaty organizations was the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, created essentially to allow the United States to have forward projection in Europe, to bring Western European countries in the main into the kind of US orbit. Well, it was not the only treaty organization. There was the Baghdad Pact, the Central Treaty Organization, the Manila Pact, the Southeast Asian Treaty Organization. So it was one of these. Now, it's important to remember that NATO never really operated independently of the United States. In the NATO headquarters was another institution. So the United States, for force projection, builds these treaty organizations. At the same time, the US military is reorganized so that it has these commands. European command, the command of US troops in Europe, or later Central Command, which will be in the Middle East, Southern Command in South America and the Caribbean and Latin America in general. So in the heart of NATO headquarters, which is headquartered in Brussels in Belgium, is also the headquarters of, European Command. In other words, US military operates directly in these theaters, like in Europe, alongside these treaties. So there's no gap between NATO and the US military. In fact, the US military dominates NATO and sets the agenda for NATO, despite the fact that the Secretary General of NATO.
I heard NATO is Antifa for countries. That's right.
And so obviously, and by the way, just to let those who are watching and listening know, you did write. This is actually based on a piece you wrote, NATO and Africa for Globetrotter. And I'm going to link to that in the description so people can go check that out. But, in that piece, you talk about a kind of global NATO, right? Like NATO's operations didn't stay isolated to Europe. You mentioned in the piece, NATO joined the US military operation in Afghanistan in 2001, which of course lasted 20 years. And then in 2011, NATO bombed Libya and overthrew its government. And you call the NATO military operations in Afghanistan and Libya a prelude to discussions of a global NATO, a project to use the NATO military alliance beyond its own charter obligations from the South China Sea to the Caribbean Sea. So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so, until the Soviet Union remained intact until 1991, NATO didn't really operate outside Western Europe. That was its ambit, essentially. It was after the Soviet Union
Hello,
collapsed
Sam.
that NATO first actually quite aggressively intervened in.
I saw a bunch of NAFO dog Avi guys argue with the Ukrainian guy for not being thankful enough for NATO's help in the war. Like I was saying, I don't know if you were around for Atlanta yesterday, but like they were calling him a bad Ukrainian and an ingrate. That is very telling. That is very telling, isn't it? We want to listen to the Ukrainians, the one as long as they're promoting the exact foreign policy position that benefits our country. Then otherwise, we don't want to hear about them. Otherwise, we might even want to be shelling them. Like I was saying, it's like all these Reddit guys, especially at the beginning of the conflict, were signing up to go and physically fight in the country and then just getting immediately vaporized and realizing that it's not like Iraq or Afghanistan or whatever, where you can just like, you see a farmer or whatever taking a pot shot at you and then you call in a drone strike and destroy the entire village. All these like weird Reddit guys are realizing that it's actually they're on the other side of that this time. So it's like, we need a way to contribute to this war effort that's not like us getting immediately blown up. So that's why they pivoted to this NAFO thing, the online OSINT cyber warfare. It's much safer for a lot of these keyboard warriors. Listen to the Ukrainians in the green shirts with the Nazi symbology. Exactly. The net code that this conflict has provided is a not insignificant amount of Redditors just no longer being around. Without us getting blown up because we had to share a selfie from the bunker. That's right. We needed those up goats. We needed those up goats, so you had to share the selfie from the bunker. One of the worst parts of the NATO standing is that all these SOCDEM types that may have once been vaguely anti-imperialist are now fully backing Western forces all over the world. It's interesting how fast it happens, isn't it? Very interesting how like this switch flipped and just like, I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of these people just got MK Ultra immediately into support, 100% unequivocally supporting Western foreign policy. Upvote my post where I show you that we're hiding in a school. They're just fucking grinding for NATO. Oh God, it's depressing. It's so depressing. The Redditors got downvoted IRL, blown up in Ukraine. Yes, they did. Yeah, this is why no one can trust the Western left. Totally unserious and undisciplined, willfully gullible. And it is indeed what no theory does to an MF. That is true.
Yugoslavia. Now, technically, you can say, well, Yugoslavia is part of the North Atlantic, treaty zone. Well, not exactly. But anyway, NATO entered into the war in Yugoslavia in 1999. That was the first, to some extent, out-of-area operation. But really, the first out-of-area operation was in Afghanistan in 2001, 2002. Now, why did NATO intervene in Afghanistan? The United States is part of the treaty, the North Atlantic Treaty. And in that treaty, it says that if one of the member states is attacked, everybody else will come to their defense. So the United States approached NATO headquarters after 9/11, and NATO said, well, you've been attacked, and therefore we will join your global war on terror. It's important for people to understand that NATO didn't merely operate in Afghanistan after 2001. NATO operated in many different places supporting the United States in the so-called global war on terror. So that was the first major out-of-area operation. The second one was Libya. I mean, there was no reason for NATO really to get involved in Libya in 2011. We can talk about the reasons for the involvement, but it was a major out-of-area involvement because, look, Libya didn't attack any NATO country. It didn't, trigger the NATO charter. NATO simply, as an act of, in a sense, aggression, attacked Libya. Yes, there was a UN Security Council resolution 1973. Yes, that Security Council resolution authorized force, said that members could use force and so on. But they were allowed to use force to maintain a no-fly zone, not to attack the Libyan state and to attack the Libyan military and so on. So NATO actually conducted a war of aggression, an illegal war of aggression against Libya in 2011. Actually, that, Rania, that war of aggression in 2011 sets in motion a discussion inside NATO headquarters to basically become the global.
All right, I just emailed VJ. Fuck it. Fuck it. I just emailed VJ Prashad about getting VJ and Noam Chomsky to come on the program. We'll see. I'm not going to guarantee anything. We will see if it happens. But I had just now emailed VJ about seeing if we can get VJ and Noam on there.
Policemen. If you can do it in Libya, why not do it anywhere else in the world? And that is actually quite chilling. Discussions about global NATO accelerate after 2011.
And then I want to get back to NATO, but just to step away from it for a moment, can you maybe discuss the European military footprint in Africa in sort of
the
parallel
Rock as
to the
well.
last
I
20
always
years
email
that
the
is
Rock.
unrelated to NATO?
Well, of course, there's an old colonial history. I mean, the Europeans went into the African continent, plundered it for millennia, 100 years more. And then, in a very famous conference in Berlin in 1884, divided up the continent, where there was sovereign countries like Ethiopia, the Italians invaded. So they were not going to permit any part of the African continent to be sovereign. It's got to be understood that Europe played a several hundred-year colonial, military colonial intervention into Africa and colonized and dominated the continent. All this doesn't start recently. This is an old history. Well, two European powers continued their military operations long after World War II. One was Britain, which maintained its hold on some of its colonies and then was quite brutal, brutal. Caroline Elkins has a terrific book, professor at Harvard University, terrific book on British brutality against the people of Kenya in the 1950s. So the military presence of Britain on the continent continues. Britain was largely removed from the continent due to the decolonization process, but France remained. France never actually left and then continued to return punctually, as they did in Mali in 2013. So the French maintained a kind of military footprint in parts of so-called French or Francophone Africa, their old colonial powers in West Africa and in the Sahel region. So France continued to have a presence. The other country that had a presence, of course, was Portugal, which was booted out by the people of Angola, Mozambique, Cabo Verde in 1974. But what's interesting is right after World War II, the United States government starts to have a larger and larger first covert CIA-type operations and then overt military presence. The decisive entry of the United States is in the Congo, when the US intervened to overthrow the government of Patrice Lumumba in 1961, principally, and this is important because it's...
And France is even more involved in West Africa. I even saw, I believe, did I see Macron himself the other day saying that like Putin was like the last colonialist European or something like that? Like, how do these motherfuckers sleep at night while making these kinds of... France talking about other countries being colonialist? Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, it's unbelievably brash. I suppose it's what we should expect from the French, but... Like, seriously, France. Macron almost got? Oh yeah, I did see that. He thought they were like, he was like smiling at the protesters and everything. He was smiling at them and he was like, oh, I'm in danger. Yeah. They're thrilled. They're really thrilled to see you. They're really thrilled to have you in town, sir. Merci. Boo. That's a real heel move. That's a heel move. When everyone's booing you and you're just like, yep, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. And of course, it's not colonialism. It's just maintaining the rules-based international order. Exactly. It's completely different.
It's not so well known, principally because the uranium
Hollywood Macron,
used in the
right.
bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki come from the
They're
Congo.
saying bonjour.
And when
That's
Patrice
right.
Lumumba wins the election in the Congo, the United States was afraid that that uranium would then be handed over to the USSR because Lumumba was a man of the left. So they overthrow the government
Just
of
doing the
Patrice
bless
Lumumba to
hands of
maintain
people as
hold
they scream
of
at
the
you.
uranium mines. There's no question about that. That's in the record, in the public record, in fact. So the United States starts to increase its military footprint. In the last 2 decades, that is to say after 9/11, the US has actually been quite aggressive. In 2002, under essentially orders from Washington, NATO started a liaison project on the African continent. That's from 2002 onwards, started having liaison relationships both with the African Union, where in fact in the headquarters in Addis Ababa, there's a NATO office, and with individual militaries of friendly countries. Secondly, that's in 2002. Secondly, in 2007, the United States creates AFRICOM, the African Command, whose headquarters remains in Stuttgart, Germany, because no African country is willing to host the African Command. But AFRICOM with NATO working through institutions like the African Union and friendly African governments has had a significant and increasing presence on the African continent, largely unremarked, including 29, at least 29 military bases on the African continent.
That's just wild. And then, of course, we can come back to the issue of Libya. Could you talk about the significance of NATO's regime change war in Libya, specifically on the security situation in Africa, and how the sort of chaos that has caused has then been used by NATO, by AFRICOM, to justify military expansion into Africa?
There's a number of points to make on this, Rania. The first point is about Libya itself. So, in the early months of 2011, there was certainly unrest in the city of Benghazi, which is in the eastern flank of Libya toward the Egyptian border. Well, as a consequence of that unrest, sections of the Libyan military defected to the protesters, and a civil conflict broke out, which had a military aspect, particularly around the towns of Ashtabia, and then in the Mediterranean. There were dogfights between those Air Force pilots who had defected and those who remained loyal to the government in Tripoli. In the middle of all this, there was a discussion at the United Nations whether there should be an intervention. The UN passed a resolution 1970 which said that no arms shipment should happen to any side of this conflict. In other words, let's dial the conflict down. At that point, the African Union empaneled a peace mission which was prepared to go to Tripoli, go to Benghazi, talk to all sides of the conflict, and create some sort of peace agreement. Well, the French in particular, but also the government, US government of Barack Obama, not interested really in this peace mission. In fact, they prevented the peace mission from flying into Libya, grounded the plane, and began bombing Libya after UN Resolution 1973. So the first outcome of this NATO war of aggression was it undermined the African Union as an institution of peacemaking on the continent. The second decisive outcome, and I think this one is important, is it, of course, destroyed Libya, because the French and the United States, under the cover of NATO, bombed Libyan state institutions into smithereens, and therefore endowed whatever government was going to come with destroyed infrastructure. In fact, we are now in 2022, 11 years later. Libya does not have a stable government, even now, 11 years later. One reason for that is the nature of the actual bombing of the Libyan state. The third outcome of the war, which is really quite important, is the United States essentially...
I mean, that is so pertinent to bring up right now with all that. We always see those posts. It was the post about Obama's tan suit and the lack of scandals. And just like, it really speaks to anyone that talks about Obama in this way. I know you don't need me to sell you on this, people in the community, but the way that like these Western liberals that fetishize people like Obama just don't view people in Libya as like human beings, you know? They don't view the victims of Obama's brutal drone strike policies as human beings. It's sick. And just the way that Libya, despite this effort on the part of NATO and the United States to bring this kind of democracy to Libya, literally just 11 years later, still a complete failed state. A place where there was a fairly high standard of living previously under Gaddafi. When people I know and like trot out the Reddit brain, NATO is a defensive pact line. It takes everything in me to not just erupt at them. Like, how fucking gullible do you have to be? Like, do you just, when these people say things, do you just automatically believe it? When people connected to NATO or the US State Department say, well, it's a defensive alliance, you just believe everything these people say? Isn't that like the most basic level of like trying to challenge these power structures, is to just assume that they're not being accurate when they say these things? You know, it's like it's fucking ridiculous. Like, is it not possible for these folks that like to think wrap their minds around the idea that people connected to NATO and the State Department and Western imperialism lie? They lie about the origins of NATO and the goal of NATO and the purpose of what it exists for. You know, it's like how are you going around repeating that kind of shit? It's just like this is the most basic level, just the fundamental rejection of this kind of obvious obfuscation of the reality of what NATO is and what its purpose is. Should just be such a no-brainer. It should be easy. Just like supporting Cuba should be easy. Just like supporting BDS or being against Israel should be easy. But people still just get tripped up by it every single fucking time. Bombing Libya's irrigation infrastructure and also bombing the industries that repairs and maintain it was a disgusting act of cruelty, and Obama and Hillary Clinton both belong in prison. Lock them up. We should lock them up. Liberalism, including the conservative brand of liberalism, is an ideology based purely on feels, vibes, and aesthetics. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to explain itself. It just has to feel good. And it certainly makes these people feel good. Like all these people that are just going all in right now on the only thing that we can ever possibly do is arm Ukraine. And it makes them feel really good that they participate in some noble struggle, some noble defensive battle. Because tankies are opposed causes them to react and support what the U.S. state says. It's like anti-communism morphed as it always does. That is true. It's strange too. Like I've been thinking about, like, because obviously we still have a deeply Islamophobic society, and I don't want to downplay that. But I think, you know, it has been, regardless of any criticisms of Orwell, it has been a very kind of Orwellian, kind of 1984-esque process over the last couple of years, where we spent 20 years getting bombarded with this rhetoric about this civilizational clash between the West and the Muslim world, like Islam, you know? And like we had that kind of institutionalized Islamophobia all across our media, all across politics. You had people that built huge platforms on this kind of like open Islamophobia, fear-mongering about Muslims. Ben Shapiro, for example, people like Sam Harris and the whole new atheist movement built massive platforms like this, and it's been very strange. And again, I know it's a trite reference to talk about this, but just the way that we've shifted from this clash of civilizations rhetoric about the Muslim world, and we just slotted in Russia and China into that spot, and all of a sudden we've just like the clash of civilizations rhetoric is still there, but we had the one focus of that was there, and we kind of moved away from that, and we just threw in another non-Western kind of cultures, other non-Western cultures. We just slotted it right into that spot, and no one even thinks twice about this. And all of a sudden, we're super anti-Russian. Whereas literally in 2012, when Mitt Romney was campaigning against Obama and said that Russia was their number one geopolitical enemy, it was a source of widespread mockery. Romney was mocked like all across the media by making these comments about Russia. And now, meanwhile, it's like it's just a complete no-brainer for all of these people to just that Russia should be our number one. It's the number one threat. We're always on the defensive from this kind of Russian propaganda. We need to arm and fund these proxies in order to fight the evil Russians. Like, it's really scary, I think, how we've just completely just switched our focus. And meanwhile, you know, the endless money printing machine keeps going to the weapons contractors, and the whole machine just continues. Or like when you talk about Obama's wonderful medical aid he provided abroad, you tell people to Google Kunduz Hospital. Kira tried that on Twitter after I said it in Discord, and the people who just accept that she's praising Obama and go along with it instead of doing the Googling part. Yeah, I had a tweet about that as well, Ghost, to talk about Obama's wonderful work with Doctors Without Borders. You can Google Doctors Without Borders and Obama to find out more info. Teeth chattering in the winter while saying this is all Putler's fault, and we're going to get to some content about that exact phenomenon after this. I wonder how an evil leader like Putin was able to get into power in Russia. Well, I guess we'll never know. It's something to do with the devious, evil Russian gene, you see. It has something to do with that. Let's not take a look into it too deeply, though. All this time, the people who actually do all the mental gymnastics are the people who have no political power. Who would have guessed? That's right. Yeah. That's something that occurred to me that's very strange, the way we kind of shifted this clash of civilizations rhetoric. The rhetoric stayed the same, but the target completely shifted, and no one even batted an eyelash about it.
Flew in right-wing jihadis from Turkey, from the Syrian border, brought them in to be frontline troops against the forces of Mr. Gaddafi. Now, this is interesting. Some of these people were members of the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group, a much earlier manifestation of kind of pro-Al-Qaeda group inside Libya. But they brought other people, quite hardcore fighters, by aircraft. They shipped them into Benghazi, sent them to Ashtabia, sent them to go and fight in the front line. Now, these people, once the so-called NATO part of the war ended, when Libya was in chaos, several of these people came from places like Algeria and so on. Well, they started going home. Now they were well armed. They were back on the North Africa, in the Maghreb region. They go off across the border to Algeria. They go down south to Mali. They enter Niger and so on.
Yeah, Lana,
and
we'll
they
get
start
into the
destabilizing
stuff
that
about the
whole
drone
region.
bombing.
So suddenly you have a
Based
new group
Brandon,
called Al-Qaeda
he
in the
ended the
Maghreb.
drone
Never heard of
bombings.
them before. Suddenly
So
in
America is
Mali,
basically a peacenik
the
now.
northern
It's a
Malian
peaceful
Tuareg
nation.
rebellion, which is an interesting rebellion, some of it led by Tuareg aristocrats. In the central region of Mali, where there's a dispute between sedentary communities and nomadic communities, all of these old conflicts in Mali, the Tuareg conflict, the conflict in central Mali, get wrapped into some sort of Al-Qaeda-esque franchise. And these forces coalesce and they go into the southern part of Mali. They take to Timbuktu. They start going south. And it's at that point in 2013 that the French make a big show of intervening to block the entry of Al-Qaeda to take over Mali. And this becomes a door to allow French and US intervention in the whole Sahel region. The French create a group called G5 Sahel, which unites 5 countries in the Sahel. They all allow French footprint. We'll come back to Niger, I'm sure, later. But this third aspect of the destabilization of the Maghreb, but particularly, to some extent Algeria, but to really the Sahel region, it has gone largely, Rania, largely unremarked in the media. How Mali went into chaos, parts of Niger went into chaos, Mauritania faced a lot of problems. And I got to be clear with you, to some extent, the rise of Boko Haram around the Lakes region in Nigeria is related to this destabilization.
And there is also the issue of the flood of weapons, right? Because that's created like its own economy across certain parts of Africa. The flood
Also
of weapons
sounds familiar,
not just
doesn't
from the war
it?
in Libya,
Almost
but also
sounds
to
like
some
it's the
extent the war in
exact same
Syria.
fucking. It almost sounds like it's the exact same playbook, doesn't it? I get a better pause face for Rania there. It almost sounds like it's literally the exact same playbook that's been used in Libya, that has been used in Syria, that has been used in Ukraine. And yet when you point this out, our fucking InfoWar, NAFO bros say that you're doing like Putin propaganda to suggest that there's any similarities between these events. And that we actually might be responsible for the bloodshed and not acting heroically and defensively to prevent it. Like, how fucking childish do you have to be to believe that? Seriously.
Of Africa, the flood of weapons, not just from the war in Libya, but also to some extent the war in Syria. And I assume at some point, I mean, these weapons that are going to Ukraine, I mean, we already know right from this recent CBS report that was then retracted after anger, is showing that these weapons that are, we're just pouring into Ukraine aren't necessarily all even making it to the front lines. So this creates a huge black market of weapons. They end up flowing to conflict zones all over the world. And in particular, Africa, you have the issue of these Salafi jihadist groups cropping up in various places, justifying further sort of like military operations like you're talking about. And then you have the issue of, creating this economy of like mercenaries, where there's all these people who are unemployed in these sort of like failing neoliberal economies, who then in certain parts of these various regions end up like.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this after, Lana, because I have a tweet lined up specifically about what you're talking about. It's so callous while he's starving Afghanistan and aiding in genocide in Yemen, and putting billions into Ukraine and Taiwan and pivoting to Africa and China as well, which people are ignoring. But the drone bombs aren't happening as much. Great, so Biden is Trump for libs. What bothers me is people thinking that drawing down drone operations or not reporting on them is the same as ending war, ending empire. Drone bombing is horrible, but starving a country to death is not better. No, starving a country to death is not better. Or when you just have your proxies doing the drone bombings and you're not physically doing them anymore, right? Now you've trained enough proxies to be doing these things for you, so you no longer have to do it. It's not any better, or you're just not reporting it. People are very, very gullible about this kind of stuff.
Like, okay, one easy way to make money is just become a soldier somewhere for some cause or issue, or mining company. Just pick up a weapon and go be a soldier. I don't know if you have anything to add about that, but I just think that's an interesting aspect that hasn't really been thoroughly investigated like it should be as sort of a consequence of all of our wars.
Yeah, America has moved on from outsourcing jobs. Now there's outsourcing the war too. And again, the proof of all this too is, like, as I mentioned before, for anyone that wants to talk about Biden ending the forever wars or whatever, well, if Biden really ended the Afghanistan war and ended all these drone strikes, surely the military budget should be reduced significantly. Has it been reduced? Of course it hasn't been reduced. It's increased. It's increased more than anyone even asked for it, with 100% bipartisan support. So that doesn't seem like a government that's really interested in undermining imperialism in any way, or undermining these forever wars, which apparently have been ended. There's not enough outrage about what we're doing in Syria, uninvited troops squatting on the oil and periodically bombing civilian infrastructure, blaming vague Iranian influence in the region. Yeah, and the Iranian influence that has been invited by the government there. While there is no government in Syria that has invited Western imperialism into the country to engage in this now like multi-year long proxy civil war thing. America outsourcing the war is exactly what it did in the 20th century during the First Cold War. That was a genocide on the scale of the Holocaust. This is not new, and it's sickening to see people fall for it again. And that's the frustrating thing as well, which is that it's the exact same playbook. And we're not allowed to, when we point that out, we get talked about like we're the ones that are fucking extremists and radicals. That's the thing that just does not make sense to me.
Well, when I was reporting in the Sahel region, I was quite struck by how so many of these Al-Qaeda type groups, including Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb, how many of them are actually just petty brigands? I mean, these are people who are involved in the cigarette trade across the Sahara. People might be surprised to learn that one of the big new conduits for cocaine to enter the United States is it comes from South America to West Africa, through the Sahara, goes up across the Mediterranean, and from Rotterdam comes to New Bedford in Massachusetts. I mean, this trajectory is remarkable. There are towns in the Sahel with names like Cocaineville and so on, where these kind of cocaine dons have big houses. They're all related in some ways to the mafia.
We should do a TRRS meetup there. Wasted away again in Cocaineville.
Al-Qaeda in that region. Then there's, of course, weapons smuggling.
I'm not going to get into the other details of that.
Weapons come south of the Sahara and human beings go north. And it's the same people that conduct this traffic. They drive those same ISIS-type white Toyota trucks across the Sahara, going from, say, Agadez in Niger out to Sabra in Libya, and then north to the Libyan coastline. They bring weapons down and carry humans up. It's the grotesqueness of that trade. That's something people should face. Like, look, I know that these groups call themselves Al-Qaeda, and then you get now Islamic Jihad and so on. But most of the people who seem to sign up for these groups are petty thugs, and they're involved in all kinds of illegal trades, especially in this region where borders are pretty porous, and you can actually make money smuggling cigarettes to get out of excise taxes and so on. A lot of money is made in the cigarette trade. So, I mean, yes, of course, weapons, and when the Ukraine conflict began, I said that you're going to give weapons there, they're going to disappear into the black market. It's no rocket science. I wasn't being prophetic or anything. In all these conflicts, in Afghanistan, in Iraq,
seems to be a common thread.
The amount of US weapons that went in there and then disappeared, into the so-called
Weird
black market.
It's
not really a black market. You can walk into well-known places in Beirut and buy all kinds. You can go into these people's homes and you can ask them for a rocket launcher, and they show it to you. They open a closet, and there in the closet is an RPG. They say, how many of these do you want? I mean, it's not really a samizdat market. It's a pretty open thing. And so, they're all American weapons because the US is flooding
almost
the world
like
with
that's
weapons.
the point.
I think Chris Hedges put it very
well. It is
well.
almost like
terrorism
that, isn't
destroying the Middle East. It's the weapons industry.
100%.
And
then,
exactly where were all the Ukraine's weapons going to end up? And they're already showing up in Syria and other places. Like, it's just been a fucking free-for-all. It's the same thing every time. This is what I've been trying to point out to people. It's amazing how controversial it is to point this out. It's the same thing every time.
Then, of course, you have all of this, these groups also. I just want to mention that, like, ISIS is sort of the new kid in town, like the new popular kid in town across Africa. Like, there's a lot of groups who prefer to like claim that they're ISIS. And then sometimes ISIS will claim that groups are ISIS when they're not really. And the groups will just say, yeah, we are. So it basically like makes this, terrorist infrastructure seem bigger than it actually might be. Because you mentioned most of these people are petty thugs. But then it's just this cycle because in the end, all of this is then again used to justify further like military expansion after all of these countries, in all these countries. It's actually a brilliant model.
It's all used to justify further intervention and further expansion. Like we were talking about with Iraq, you look at these countries that have been so destabilized, and rather than anyone in the media articulating a viewpoint about how the West, how the United States and Western imperialism and NATO and these big organizations have been responsible for the chaos, rather than any of that, all the chaos that's happened is just used as an excuse for more intervention, more weapons transfers, more proxies. It's just endless, just this endless grift.
Like overall for like expanding AFRICOM, for expanding NATO, and for the Europeans to expand, whatever operations they're, launching across these various regions. But I want to connect this a little bit more to the issue of what we're seeing play out right now in terms of information warfare, because it seems like even though this military expansion is taking place, the U.S. and the Western countries are in many ways at the moment losing in Africa in the long term. Mali, something you've written about, Mali just kicked out French troops, for example. And then, of course, half the African countries abstained or voted against the UN resolution condemning Russia. And then most of Africa is really just refusing to get on board with the Western sanctions on Russia, largely because they're reliant on these raw commodities. And then this has upset
They're
the
not
Americans
interested in
so much
participating in this at
as
all.
we're recording this, this week, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is on this Africa tour, or just after Russia's Lavrov, to try to convince African countries to stop buying Russian commodities like grain and
They
wheat
have
and
no interest in this
fertilizer, even
whatsoever.
if it starves them. And so I'm just curious, like, if you would agree with that assessment, that as far as the, sort of sphere of influence goes, the U.S. seems to be in a very weak position at the moment, despite this military expansion over the war in Ukraine.
And Lana, this is a good point. This is a good point. Also, there's the only upside to this: first time as tragedy, second time as farce. A lot of these operations aren't working like they used to because a lot of places aren't biting anymore. And that's one of the things that I've been talking about a lot on this channel now over 2 years, right? That's why China is so important. And that's why it's important that we do support China and support China's new role in the world, because all of a sudden it's just limited the ability of Western imperialism in the United States to go in and bully all these countries. They can't go in and bully Africa anymore. They can't go in and bully Latin America anymore, because it's not like these countries have to choose between Western style IMF loans and Western style development or total chaos and destabilization. All of a sudden they no longer have to do that. And now it gives places like Africa this opportunity. When Blinken comes in and starts lecturing them about like, no, you will not support Russia. You will not. And they're just like, no, I think we will. I think we will still continue to do that. This is not something that would have been happening a very short time ago. And even I think we were talking about a few moments ago, like the UN resolution in Libya. I think even then you had China and Russia kind of going along with that, precisely because they didn't have the ability to push against it at that time. But Syria was when things started to shift, and all of a sudden that was the kind of, like we talked about before, that was kind of the emergence of that kind of multipolarity. When the United States tried to run this playbook on Syria and it failed, and they have not been able to do it since then. Libya was like the last time that this kind of playbook was successful. That's the kind of really interesting thing about the global dynamic that we're in right now. That's completely unprecedented, and like for most of our entire lives has been completely unprecedented.
It's complicated, I mean, I know it's horrible to hear that phrase, it's complicated, but it is pretty complicated. So there is, I think, a new mood appearing on the African continent among the 55 heads of government. Not all of them, obviously, not the King of Morocco and so on, But in many places, there's a new mood appearing. Let's take the case of Niger. It has become clear to the people of Niger that the reason the French and the United States have military bases in Niger is not really to fight Al Qaeda, it's not really about security issues and so on, but it's for two other issues. Number one, they are there because they are policing the Sahara border. Europe wants its border to be south of the Sahara, not north of the Mediterranean. And that's the reason why they have heavily policed countries like Niger, which are a pathway into Libya. Secondly, in the town of Arlit, which is in the northern part of Niger, it's the home of yellowcake uranium.
You say Latin American trade too has shifted to China, and the U.S. can only cope. That's I'm sure you were around for when you watched this clip a couple months ago, Red Wizard. But I think it was a clip that really I found it so astounding. The U.S. diplomat talking about Latin American countries. They're like, they have the opportunity to go with us, and they're choosing China, and they're really looking around, and they're so confused about what's going on. They really don't understand why anyone in Latin America or elsewhere is choosing to do business with China and rejecting the U.S. when they're like, we'll help you develop. And these countries in Africa and in Latin America are saying like, no, thank you. We don't want anything. We know what Western style development looks like, and we want nothing to do with that. Nothing. Leave us alone. And these U.S. diplomats are just going like, huh. They're just like completely like taken aback by this. They have no idea what's going on. It's really incredible. I got to find that clip again because it was stunning to me to watch.
Something like 75% of the households in France have their light bulbs powered by the uranium from Niger. It's very clear that the reason Arlit is garrisoned by the French troops isn't for human rights, but it's for uranium. So there's a growing sense in much of the continent. We saw that in Mali, the protests against the French military occupation, and then the French had to actually leave Mali because the second military coup chucked them out. There's a growing mood among people that the military occupation in this part of the world is largely based on the principle of raw materials. But the other side of it, which I think is quite important, quite key, not just about raw materials, is that there's a feeling that countries just don't want to be bullied around anymore. And I think that's the reason when the African Union was under pressure by the United States to hold a talk by Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, only two actual heads of state came to that Zoom meeting. And in fact, around the time, just before Zelensky came to meet the African Union, in other words, only two countries came for that meeting. Just before that, the leaders of the African Union went to Sochi to meet Vladimir Putin. So there's a kind of complicated situation. But at the same time, Rania, I wouldn't want to exaggerate this too much because the United States still has a very large military footprint. As I said, 29 military bases. United States, yet using the International Monetary Fund, has a great position in terms of development financing on the continent. These things are also there. So countries are trying to navigate the situation, but there is definitely a new mood growing on the continent.
And of course, there's also this, like you mentioned, bullying taking place. I just want to note there is this bill that was introduced in Congress by the Representative Gregory Meeks from New York. It's called HR 7311, and it's called the Countering Malign Russian Activities in Africa Act. And this bill calls for the State Department to monitor the relationships between Russia and African countries and officials, and to punish those African countries and African officials who are supposedly aiding Russia's malign influence and activities, whatever that means. And it's actually not only limited to African countries. The bill also demands that the State Department also report on how Russia is, and I quote, manipulating African governments and their policies, as well as the public opinions and voting preferences of African populations and diaspora groups, including those in the U.S. So I think that's pretty astounding, that language. But, most importantly, this bill calls for punishing African governments and officials for
literally
violating
just choosing
any
to
unilateral U.S. sanctions on
do
Russia
business with
and
other
Russian companies and individuals. So there's that's sort of like in the works in Congress. And then, of course, U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas Greenfield, has also told African countries what they can and cannot buy for their livelihoods. On her visits to Uganda, Ghana, and Cape Verde, she said that Russia has been peddling a false narrative, that Western sanctions are to blame for keeping much needed grain from international markets. And then she actually warned these countries that there would be consequences for buying Russian oil. So on the one hand, you have the Americans like warning about Russian and Chinese malign influence. On the other hand, you have this kind of U.S. malign influence that's just making these threats. So I'm curious what you think about this dynamic.
Well, look, the United States government is entitled to say and do whatever it wants. It's a sovereign entity. And if they want to say to
Trump
countries,
won.
you
Hell
can't
yeah,
do
brother.
this, you can't do that, the countries better make their own decisions. I mean, I'd like to see the government of Uganda say, look, you can't tell us who we can be friends with.
Thank you. Where we go one, we go all. Yeah, that's the official editorial line of this channel, so thanks for letting us know. Brandon stole the election, folks. What can we say? Illegitimate. Not my president, if you ask me. Lock him up. Where's Hunter? That's my question. Where's Hunter? Where's that laptop story? Why is no one asking these questions?
After all, Russia continues to be a member of some standing in the United Nations.
Let's see the laptop.
It has, a foreign minister and ambassadors, and these.
I'm wondering the same. You should be. You should be. I saw there was new Q drops today. There's probably some really good intel in there. What do you think? Where we go one, we go out. What do you think about President Xi of China? That's the president that we look up to on this channel, not Brandon. We're big Xi heads over here. And I think if you look deeper into the Q drops, you'll see that Q wants you to go in that direction as well.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
I wasn't going to sub until I saw this was a Q-friendly sub. Salute to you fellow WWG1 warriors.
Thank you very much, Brooklyn. 12 months of tier 1. Really appreciate that. We got to stick together. We got to stick together in a community, and I appreciate that. Why didn't Trump lock up Hillary? Big L, if you ask me. That to me was one mistake for the big man. That was one mistake for the big man. I think he should have followed through on that. He did. Hillary as a body double. Isn't she doing like a whole new documentary and everything? Like a body double, usually you have someone that looks kind of similar, but they don't look identical. Like most elites. See, I don't know if I buy that. I'm not so sure. Here's what I don't know. If Trump did lock up Hillary and she's got a body double, like Lana's saying, why didn't he just lock up the body double? Why didn't he go on TV and say, folks, we've locked her up. We've locked up Hillary. I promised I was going to do it. And we've locked her up. And you show footage of them. You show footage in the leg irons and stuff. Like, why all the subterfuge and the body doubles and all this stuff? Why doesn't the big man just say like, yeah, we're doing it? You know? If you have a crap ton of money and do corrupt shit all the time, of course you're going to want to have a double. Okay. Well, I mean, that's an interesting angle, definitely, that maybe we can explore some. To me, if I was Trump, I would just why not just expose this whole body double scam?
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Wait, there are more than one Hillary? POGGIES awesome TRRS drums.
Thank you, Useless, for the 200 friend coin. Exactly. Now I can be still with her even more now. I can be still with her even double. Why doesn't Trump's body double fight Hillary's body double in a steel cage? The winner becomes president. Who would have a problem with that? Biden is actually Trump that had multiple surgeries. The orange fat Trump we see is the double. Okay. Again, I guess that's possible. When she passed out at the 9/11 remembrance thing and chucked into the van, they should have taken her directly to prison. I agree. I absolutely agree with that. They took a spare Obama double and turned him into the new Putin. Oh, wow. I hadn't heard about that. I don't know about Trump body double. There's speculations that he has access to Tesla's time machine through his uncle who worked closely with him. Where we go one, do we go well? Are you fucking with us? Let's drop the bit. Let's drop the kayfabe here. Let's drop the You're fucking with us, right? Come on. The Time Machine. I was with you before until Time Machine. Because I know people really do believe in the body double shit. I know people really do believe that. I'm not doing this Time Machine thing with you. I refuse to believe that you believe that. Come on, man. We never considered triples. Triples is best. It's safest. Okay, this is epic. You couldn't pay me to get into a Tesla. No fucking way you get me to walk into an Elon time machine. You're gonna put the bottom half on backwards, like in Spaceballs. Or like the machine from The Fly. Okay, not Elon, actual, like the real Tesla. Okay. I'm not saying I believe it, but there is speculations. It kind of seems like you believe it a little. Frankly. There is some weird shit about Trump's uncle being a time traveler. QAnon Anonymous did an episode on that nonsense. I don't know what to make of all this. I don't know who's kayfabe and who here, frankly. I don't know who's doing a bit and what's going on now. Was Trump's Uncle John Titor. That's right. There we go. Tesla made that clone machine in the Prestige. That's right. Maybe he's the one that's making the doubles. Okay, that's something that I can fuck with that. That's interesting. That is interesting to me. He never died. He went to dinosaur times. The Prestige is good. That's one of the Nolan's better movies. If this isn't true, why is there a Baron Trump character in 19th century books? God. We're through the looking glass here, people. After every rally, the latest Trump clone falls through the trap door. This timeline is so stupid and shitty at Trump using a time machine to fuck everything up sounds plausible, and they tried to signal it to us in Back to the Future Part 2 with Biff Tannen's storyline. They were spelling it right out for us. They were spelling out exactly what was going on. Okay, we're getting sidetracked now, but let's go back to this video. We still got another 30 minutes to go. And I have to leave after. Let's get through this here.
These countries have to deal with Russia. Russia is a major power in the world. It's ridiculous for them to be bullied. On the other hand, I want to encourage your viewers, Rania, to go to the Monthly Review website where there's a new...
Things have been weird since he buried Ivana on the golf course. I saw someone tweet about this. Sorry, I can't credit it because I don't remember exactly who it was, but tweeting about how Don Jr. posted a picture of like Trump with like a big area in his like genital region blacked out to suggest that like my dad is like a huge dick, I guess was the purpose of that post by Donald Jr. while he was on a golf course where his mom is buried in like this pauper's grave in the golf course. And it's like, you don't want to say Freud was right about everything, but there's definitely something going on there. There's something weird and dark going on there, animating all that kind of stuff. That's totally normal behavior. We haven't even gotten into all the shit about Trump and doxing CIA agents and stuff. We'll get into that tomorrow because that's a whole conversation. Because I see people clutching their pearls about that as well. Oh my God, Trump gave the locations of these CIA agents to Russia and China. And it's like, I don't really like the guy, but I got to support when he gets it right. I'm not going to pretend that that's like a bad thing that I'm against. I actually think that that's a W in the column. That's in the W column for Donnie. Freud was right, especially about the sexual pathologies of the bourgeoisie. There is definitely something to that. Absolutely. Sometimes you do, in fact, have to hand it to him. Let's punt that till tomorrow. We'll talk about Trump and the doxing the CIA agents and stuff. We'll talk about that tomorrow, all right? Let's continue with this video.
Investigation out by Ajit Singh and Roscoe Palm which actually details how the United States government, through the National Endowment for Democracy, in association with private US foundations like the Open Society Foundations and Luminate, which is Pierre Omidyar's foundation, this conglomerate of public-private intervention has intervened to influence the South African media, including major liberal publications such as
not just media, but going into the social media companies and rooting out all the people that are doing Russian propaganda. It's Soros's Open Society Foundation and Pierre Omidyar doing this. They're doing it in Africa as well, and they're doing it in the West, on social media in the West as well. I heard that data got stolen by Iran, and they gave the info to China and Russia later. I actually heard that as well. I want to dive into this when we have more time to get into it. We're going to talk more in depth about that tomorrow.
There's the Daily Maverick and so on.
But if it was Trump,
the
I support
United States famously goes around saying China or Russia are, unfairly intervening, forcing people to do this and that. Meanwhile, the evidence suggests the United States government, as you said, the UN ambassador going to a country saying you can't buy this from here or that from there, or Mr. Anthony Blinken going to countries, you can't talk to this, you can't talk to that. And now we hear that liberal publications taking money from US foundations and from the US government through this complex of public-private partnership are being told basically what to go and research. In fact, some of the great breakthrough stories that were done on quote-unquote state capture in South Africa appear to have been dictated by the Open Society Foundations. At least that's how the Open Society Foundations claim in their own releases. It may not be true after all. They may be also exaggerating the influence, but that's interesting. It's up to these publications to deny it in a way. So the US government can tell anybody how to behave, what to do. That's fine. It's up to the countries in the world, the 192 other countries that exist, whether they want to be bullied around. I mean, look, again, I don't think it's outrageous for a country to tell another country what they should eat or drink. That kind of thing happens all the time. But should you have to listen to them? Not so. For the dignity of countries, people should just say, listen, we can trade with whomever we want. Sorry, you can't make that if the United States says, if you trade with Russia, we won't trade with you, that is going to end up hurting the United States, I'm afraid. So people in the United States need to think about that, whether this kind of scorched earth foreign policy going around the world telling countries, if you trade with China, if you trade with the Russians, then you won't trade with us. People might turn around and say, okay, we won't trade with you. That's going to really hurt the United States. And so people in the United States need to think about these issues, not be arrogant enough to believe that countries in Africa, because of a colonial hangover, will say, well, obviously we'll go with the US over the Chinese. That may not be the answer you'll receive.
Yeah, it's also funny because, today there was this article out in the New York Times, and it was actually complaining that Facebook and Twitter and all these social media companies, their censorship mechanisms don't extend into non-English outlets. So that, Russia, basically Russia has all these outlets in Spanish and Arabic that aren't being censored like the English speaking ones. And that's actually bigotry on the part of these, of Facebook and Twitter to not be also censoring in Arabic and English. I mean, there really is this obsession with controlling the narrative in these countries.
It's so satisfying.
I think that these sort of American accept.
It's so satisfying to see how sick of our bullshit everyone is. It is satisfying, isn't it? It is. You have to support it, You really do.
Exceptionalists are having a very difficult time understanding why don't Africans and people in Latin America and people across the Middle East why don't they care about Ukraine the way we do? They just can't understand that maybe people in these global south countries don't have the bandwidth to care about a war in Europe given what's taking place in their own countries, or maybe their own experiences with the West make them more skeptical of Western narratives when it comes to wars. I mean, there's so many reasons other than maybe they're watching Russian media. And maybe it is because they're watching Russian media and getting a different side. But at least in my experience in Lebanon and Iraq, I feel it's more like a result of it's a European problem. It's not our problem. And also the West lies. That's just, I don't know. That's how I see it, at least. It's just stunning to me, the level of the lack of understanding, the lack of awareness. But anyways, I wanted to ask you.
And also just getting into Africa particularly as well, and the Africa's relationship with Russia. Not that Russia is not the Soviet Union now, but definitely there's many people in Africa that remember the transition from colonialism to neocolonialism and who the West was backing in their countries each and every time, and who the Russians were backing, and what the Western goals were versus what the Russians' goals were. They remember that. They remember that Russia tried to support these struggles for independence from the colonialist powers, and they know full well that America and the West was doing everything they can to undermine and overthrow any of these revolutionary movements that were more that were based in socialism and Pan-Africanism. The West very intentionally destroyed all of that ruthlessly crushed it, while Russia was doing what they could to support it. And people in these countries remembered this. I can't believe people in other countries have the nerve to not have goldfish memories like we do. Don't they know that we're the good guys of history? What's going on here? It's so, people get so perplexed by this.
The level of like the lack of understanding, the lack of awareness. But anyways, I wanted to ask you about a somewhat related issue, and that's the issue of Germany. You know, Germany is gearing up to become the world's third largest military spender, which is a pretty big deal. And all of this is under the guise of Russia's war on Ukraine. However, you know, it seems very unlikely that Germany would ever actually fight Russia. Like, I don't think they have that capability. I don't think they're going to have that capability. I don't think they actually have that intention. So I'm wondering, do you think that this could lead to Germany getting more involved in places like countries across Africa, rather, you know, just using the sort of Russia issue as a pretext in terms of the military spending? Because we already do see the Germans playing a role in Mali. I mean, I know it's not a combat operation, but they are there. And Germany does have a little known nasty history across Africa that, of course, we don't really grow up learning about in the US or probably anywhere in the global north. But, you know, what do you think about the prospects of the sort of militarization of Europe that this is provoking, and what that might mean in countries across Africa?
America,
I think it's important to actually just name what you were saying, which is that before the Holocaust in Europe, German colonialism in places like Southwest Africa was responsible for documented genocides against the indigenous people of these areas, you know, the Herero people and others. I mean, these are documented on the record genocides conducted by the German military forces on the African continent prior to the Holocaust. You know, M.S. Cesar's great discourse on colonialism sets the record straight. He says, look, you know, what happened in Germany was terrible, and in Poland and so on was terrible, the Holocaust. But the people of Africa, of Asia, Latin America, we have experienced this kind of genocidal policy for maybe 100 years during the colonial period. So this is not a surprise to us. We are not surprised that this has happened in the world. The Europeans are surprised that it's happened to Europeans, but they're not surprised when it happens to non-Europeans.
When we do it, it's actually okay.
That was M.S. Cesar's astoundingly powerful text, Discourse on Colonialism. Okay, there it is. So my feeling is that Germany right now is in a really tough position because, you know, if you look at the German economy over the last
going to be very rough in Germany.
Last decade, at least under the last period of Angela Merkel's chancellorship, Germany became more and more dependent on Russian energy exports, more and more dependent. So that the day that the conflict began in Ukraine, about little more than 30% of Germany's energy needs were supplied by Russia. In fact, recently, in the middle of this conflict, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has repeatedly said that Germany can't stop buying energy from Russia. And he went back and inspected one of the Nord Stream 1 turbines. You know, that was an interesting moment when he went and inspected those turbines. It's very unlikely that Germany is going to be able to go to zero from buying 30% of its energy from Russia. Now, how will they, essentially
and it's hard talking about this, and we're going to, like, if I have time especially, I have to go in about 40 minutes, but if we have time especially, I want to talk about these kind of energy consequences that we're going to see in Germany and in England and in France and other places. And it's like, yeah, I can't wait to see what winter is like in Germany. And it's like, I'm torn at the same time because average people, especially, you know, the poor, disabled, elderly people, are obviously going to be the ones that suffer the most from this big energy crisis that is on the horizon now. I have a ton of sympathy for those people who have had nothing to do with the political decisions that their government has been making that has led to this crisis. Like, it's as normal, as usual, it is going to be average people and disadvantaged people that are lower in this kind of like in the economic caste system are going to be the ones to bear the brunt of the punishment for it. I have a ton of sympathy for those people that are going to be affected by it. I don't have a ton of sympathy for the ruling classes in these countries and with the shit that they're going to be dealing with when you have this mass crisis kind of kick off and the social unrest that's going to come along with that. You know, I don't want to see people suffer, certainly, especially people that had nothing to do with any of these decisions. But I do not have sympathy for these governments that have gleefully just committed economic suicide at the behest of the United States and Western imperialism. It's proper fucked in the UK. We're getting wrecked. Yeah, and it's like I was talking about the other day, Dave, the way that UK media is talking about that as well. It's being like, they want the suffering, right? They want to go back to like the war torn, the rationing and all that shit because they think it made them stronger, even though it's going to be miserable. And a lot of these people that fetishize that era in British history weren't even there and simply just remember movies that they watched and think that it happened to them because their brains are just completely destroyed. Liz Truss is going to be the answer. And all these countries doubling, tripling down on people that are going to make all these things worse. Maybe we'll get East Germany back. That would be one best case scenario. The UK is already telling its citizens to prepare for increased energy bills to the tune of £3,500 this winter. Like, that's just, I don't think any of us, I've said this a couple of times, but I don't think any of us have reckoned with what that is going to look like practically. You know, it's going to be completely unprecedented. And people are going to rightfully lose their minds over it. One thing different with the Germany is very strong anti-nuclear sentiment. Developed after Fukushima incident, and they were shutting them down in the last decade, including the German Greens were like part of the leaders of that campaign, right? That made them more dependable on fossil fuels. Maybe this year will accelerate them, make them accelerate renewable projects. I guess that would be one outcome, yeah. Yeah, the UK president's just out here telling people to get used to eating rotten food and drinking sewage and stuff. Yeah, very normal and very cool.
Russian energy. What's the options? Look at the options. Number one is buying liquefied natural gas from the United States and the Gulf Arab states, way more expensive than piped natural gas through Nord Stream 1 and 2. Can the German economy bear the increased cost? No. Number two option, maintaining nuclear. You know, Germany has pledged to sunset its nuclear power plant. Well, they're going to have to maintain nuclear. Number three, even more dramatic, Germany has said they're going to go to zero coal. Now there's talk of restarting coal generation. Well, you will have no leg to stand on now when you criticize India, when you criticize other countries in the south that rely on coal. Suddenly in the middle of Europe, you're going to have coal-fired energy plants again. Well, if you're going to take seriously the break with Russia, you're going to have to go to coal. Well, and then next, are you really going to contemplate a war with Russia, an all-out war? I mean, right now there's a conflict taking place in Ukraine, which is a kind of slow but steady attrition of basically the defenses of Ukraine. I mean, the Russians are slowly, terribly, making their gains, and nobody's capable of stopping them. I mean,
what do we think actually happens? COVID responses point to yes, they will let people freeze and starve for Ukraine, but if they don't, do they just subsidize the energy to avoid unrest? What are the outs? As we know, they won't be able to negotiate in good faith with Putler. That's the question. That's the $1 million question, the £1 million question, even, old Dutch. I really do not fucking know. But yeah, it's like they're obviously willing to sacrifice their own citizens for this, just like they're willing to sacrifice the average Ukrainian, right? We want to fight to the last Ukrainian, etc. But there's all these like social Darwinist reactionaries in charge of all these places that don't believe in subsidizing electricity. And there's a whole media campaign that's like, we're gonna grin and bear it, that British, the stiff upper lip and all that. That's what they're gonna be doing. They're gonna be like, have a stiff upper lip, have a bunch of blankets in your house, burn your furniture. That's gonna be the fucking response. And we'll see how that goes. We'll see how people accept that. Even if they do end up negotiating, Russia's not just going to turn back on the gas at a big price. It's amazing how they've just seems like they've got all the cards, which is, it makes so much more sense now why they felt comfortable enough to go ahead with this invasion when they knew full well what we always say, all options have been considered, right? All outcomes have been considered. It really seems like they were not kidding around when they said that at the beginning of this invasion. I think they're banking on Brits being so broken and unable to resist that they just let the undesirables die. I mean, yeah, it's going to be another version of what we've seen during COVID. The West basically said they hate everything Russian. Yeah, and like I was saying earlier, Dakadoon, it's been interesting how we've pivoted over the last couple of years into Russia being the number one geopolitical enemy, which for years previously was just not even on the radar. As recently as 2012, when Mitt Romney was mocked for saying that they were America's number one geopolitical rival. Yeah, and Russia and China have been insulating their economies by dropping the U.S. dollar in the last decade. They're trying to transition into this new global economic system and try to provide a different alternative that's outside that U.S. dollar hegemony, and it's working.
Land bridge to Crimea is basically complete. The Donbass region is basically integrated. What else remains? The Russians don't really want to seize Kiev. They certainly want to weaken the government in Ukraine. That's clear. That's their war aim. But nobody is capable of stopping them. This is just a slow and ugly advance of their goals. Why not stop the war, start a negotiation, see what kind of outcome will happen? I mean, there's no way that the Russians are going to withdraw from Crimea. If they're not withdrawing from Crimea, there's no way they're going to withdraw from the land bridge they have made. There's no way they're going.
And it's like, and hearing people like Zelensky and other people, our friends in NATO or whatever, being like, we're going to take back Crimea. Like that's what they think that they're negotiating from. We're going to negotiate with Russia, and we want more territory than we had prior to this than we do now. Like that's really what these people think. It's completely delusional. It's totally delusional. Yeah, we'll negotiate with Russia as long as not only do they leave all these regions that they've now at great expense absorbed, but we're also going to take back other territory that they annexed. And what leverage do we have to do this? Well, we don't know. I don't know. That's shrewd negotiating. It's like I don't know who thinks that there is an audience for this. That stance is purely there to continue the war. And that's right, John. That's it. Because that's the only option then. Because obviously a child could understand that Russia's not going to agree to that.
We're going to say we're going to give you the Donbass region back. So there's going to have to be major negotiations about all this. Well, rather than do that, Biden, the Germans and others continuing to give military assistance to Mr. Zelensky and saying, don't have a peace agreement. What are you going to do? Are you serious? Germany is going to go to war with Russia. Didn't turn out very well in the 1940s. And, it may be worthwhile for the French to recognize that when Napoleon tried to go and defeat the Russians, he was also defeated. It's not easy to defeat Russia. Russia is an enormous country. It stretches from one end of Europe right to the other end of Asia. I mean, what are we talking about here? What is the defeat of Russia going to mean? And it looks very unlikely, Rania, that any kind of campaign inside Russia is going to, in a precipitous way, get rid of Vladimir Putin from the leadership or his political party, which has a very strong lock on popular opinion. So, I mean, I don't understand what German spending is going to be used upon. It's certainly not going to be used on...
If Russia sees just one huffy British PM's face, the power will come back on. Yeah, there we go. Zelensky's also taken this opportunity to absolutely destroy what was left of Ukrainian left parties, unions, labor laws, just handed the country on a platter to Western capital interests. And I wonder if he's the one pulling the strings there, if that's what his Western advisors are advising him for. I wonder. Unfortunately, it's impossible to know. We had to do this shock doctrine privatization of our entire economy because Russia bad.
A war against Russia, that's suicidal and crazy. I have a feeling that this is just happening to please the US. That we're going to increase military. It's what Trump had been demanding for years. But look at what's happening in Europe. It's complete political chaos. In Italy, they're not going to have a good government there. Eastern Europe, you got Orban again talking about the Great Christian Alliance and so on. I mean, Europe is in extreme disarray. Some of this is a consequence of this war in Ukraine, just as the NATO war in Libya destabilized most of North Africa. I think this Ukraine conflict is going to destabilize a large number of Western European countries.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the coming years. But,
Yes,
you did write this piece for Monthly Review back in May. It was titled Africa's on the...
Ironically, and this is a good point, Lamport, you're absolutely right, though. Ironically, shock doctrine privatization is what created the monster in Russia. Yes, it is. And I'm sure there will be no similar blowback from all this shock doctrine destabilization and privatization in Ukraine right now and all the arms funds and weapons transfers that we've seen. I'm sure there's going to be no similar blowback to that, years from now. Fucking unbelievable.
And of course, I'll link to that in the description of this video as well. And I raise that just to note, Africa is so often ignored by the mainstream media in the global north, unless there's some sort of drive for like US military intervention in some African country. And then I think because the left in the US is so often reacting to the mainstream media, they also end up ignoring Africa. And I'm sure there's some, implicit racism in that as well. But I think for the most part, to be generous, I think that's probably one of the reasons. But the point is, for many, Africa can seem like this just like sort of poor and confusing place that's too difficult to understand and isn't really like relevant right now.
Zelensky is their own Yeltsin. And one funny thing about Zelensky is when the West eventually turns on him, because we all know that they will, and he's going to become eventually a public enemy, or if he's not just assassinated, which is also a likely outcome. But it'll be very interesting to see that process take place, and all the people that like have have engaged in this kind of like Zelensky fetishization. Oh, they're all just going to forget that they were part of that, right? Oh, that never happened. As soon as we shift away from that. De-Sovietizing labor laws in Ukraine. Those which have up to 250 employees would in effect be removed from the country's existing labor laws and covered by individual contracts negotiated with their employer. More than 70% of the Ukrainian workforce would be affected by this change. Again, it's like people are going to have to stop pretending that this is because of Russia that this is happening. After Ukraine eventually comes to a deal with Russia, someone in the Ukrainian diaspora in Canada is going to blame the U.S., Canada, and do some sort of big terrorist attack here. Again, the Azov blowback. It's only a matter of time before we get it either in Canada or the United States.
Even though it's a continent with over 1 billion people that has, historically been home to so many revolutions and a real like bedrock of the anti-colonial struggle. And of course, it's also the most exploited continent in the world. It's been subjected to hundreds of years of like resource theft and human theft and interference and assassinations and coups. And so that revolutionary potential is still absolutely there, perhaps like at its highest today, even though the continent remains captured by imperialism. So, and of course, there are a couple at least independent governments in Africa that can act sort of as like alternatives, alternative models, though they're totally maligned. Like Eritrea comes to mind, a country that, we at Breakthrough got to visit late last year. But I'm curious, can you maybe, given all that I just said, can you explain to our mostly, leftist listeners in the US, perhaps in Europe as well, why Africa is so important in the struggle against imperialism? And how does it relate to that title of your piece, Africa is on the Move?
Well, the first thing to pay attention to is Africa is an extraordinarily rich continent. It is rich in resources, both human and
you don't go to poor
and in
countries
terms
to
of
make
natural
money.
resources. There are large number of universities, a high level of educated public, and so on. And yet, in most of the countries, there is miserable poverty. There
Only
is
the
terrible
people are
mismanagement of the funds of the government, and so on. So you got this immediate contradiction of an extraordinarily rich continent in resources, people, imagination, and so on, and you've got this glaring poverty and theft of resources at the same time. And I think that's something to pay attention to. Secondly, it's not like the people on the continent have been sitting around doing nothing. I mean, the reason I drew that phrase, Africa is on the move, from Walter Rodney, is that there are a number of important social and political movements on the way. One area of important movement is the youth movement. It's an extremely young continent. You've got the Sankarist movement in Burkina Faso, mostly young people, extraordinarily brave. You've got the youth movement in the Congo, extremely brave, organizing, having public meetings against enormous violence, both from the government and then in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo, from the ceaseless and illegal interventions by the government of Rwanda, which comes into Goma and routinely sacks the country, as it were. So you have all these youth protests taking place, many of them organized in different kind of networks, running away from being closed down and being arrested and so on. Then you have the establishment of a new set of socialist organizations, quite explicitly socialist parties, some of them with public presences and so on, such as the Socialist Party of Zambia, ran for election, has a presence in most of the country. Again, a very rich country, rich with copper, rich with other minerals and so on, but impoverished by the theft of its resources. There's the Socialist Party of Zambia. There's the socialist movement in Ghana. The socialist movement in Ghana is a revival of the ideas of Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana, driving a left-of-center agenda in that country, building up a new generation of young people who are committed to, the project of transcendence of all these terrible, maladies like poverty and illiteracy and so on. In a country like Nigeria, you've got somebody like Sean Kuti, the son of Fela Kuti, leading a mass struggle, again, largely of a lot of young people, but they're organized into a political force, trying to compel people into believing in the importance of a future, that even Nigerians can have a future. So you got socialist movements in Zambia, Ghana, Nigeria. This is significant. And then you've got the much more established left forces, for instance, in South Africa. Big trade union movement, National Union of Metal Workers just finished their Congress. You got the South African Communist Party, which has a new General Secretary, Solly Mapila, who has been very, very forceful in his criticism of the government of South Africa, but yet understands that this government is playing a role, at least in foreign policy terms, of not totally bending its knee to the United States. But nonetheless, the South African Communist Party also making quite vigorous critiques of the government, its economic policies, and so on. You got a lot of activity, Rania, from these youth movements, from social movements.
And if you remember, like we saw when the representative of the ANC youth wing talked to Rania Khalek, we watched that a couple months ago, and it was cool that I was able to ask Rania about this when we spoke, but was like super unapologetic and very much pro-Russia, pro-Putin, like almost to the point that like we're so used to trying to be as nuanced as possible about this. And it was funny to see Rania interview the representative of the youth wing of the ANC that were just like, no, we back Russia 100%. And she was kind of like, oh, okay. And it's like, that's how fervent it is. But it's like, I think it's an example of like where those political winds are blowing with these youth movements, like what BJ's talking about.
Women's movement in Tanzania, for instance, on the move, rising up and so on. You've got new movements of young people that are committed to defending gays and lesbians on the continent. That's a new and powerful new development of how to understand oneself and so on. So, I mean, I don't look at the African continent and say, oh my God, there's all this Western imperialism and so on. There are people doing things, struggling, fighting, trying to imagine new futures, pulling back the heritage of Lumumba, of Nkrumah, pulling back the old national liberation traditions and trying to build on them again. So it's a continent on the move, Rania. It's not a blight. We don't need to assemble a bunch of pop musicians to sing a stupid song like "Do They Know It's Christmas?" I mean, do they know it's Christmas? Come on, Bob. Do they know it's Christmas? I mean, there's lots of people who are not Christian on the African continent. They are Muslims, they are animists, they are atheists, they are Hindus, they are all kinds of things. Do they know?
And in our lifetime, we'll see Africa become a global superpower. We will. We will see Africa rise to become a global superpower in our lifetimes, because with Western imperialism in the United States and Canada and these countries have used every dirty trick in the book to ensure that this never happens. It would have happened already if the sort of post-colonial movement had been able to develop unencumbered by this constant interference by Western imperialism.
Use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Do they know it's Christmas? Come on, Bob. Hello, Rob. Hello, chat.
Thank you very much, valued community member Pissed, for the 200 friend coin. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. We're happy to have you back, Pissed.
Oh, it's Christmas. And then, of course, the Quincy Jones song, We Are the World. Well, it is fitting for European and US singers to sing We Are the World.
Come on, Bob.
Well, what about Africa? The people of Africa, that's also the world. And they are building their own destiny. They don't need NATO. They don't need African Command. They certainly don't need.
Yeah, hopefully this will shut up the. I'm sure it won't, Lana. Shut up the being gay is a Western idea. Yeah, it's all Western decadence, and the only way we can ever support, countries in the developing world of the global South is by being bigots. That's the only thing that these people like. Hopefully that will quiet them down, but I don't believe that they will.
President Joe Biden, they have their own political process and their destiny.
Indeed. And on that note, I do just have a couple more questions for you, tangentially related, while I have you here, just to get your take on. First and foremost, I'm curious, and this is going to seem like a big pivot, but everything's connected. What do you think the U.S. wants with Taiwan, and why did Nancy Pelosi visit when she did?
Well, that's an interesting story because, it should be better known that under the Carter administration,
yearning for the same freedom that Ukraine has now.
The government recognized the People's Republic of China as the representative of the Chinese people.
Thanks for stopping by.
Leaving to some extent ambiguity around Taiwan. By the way, Taiwan has a population of 22 million. It's not an enormous compared to 1.4 billion in the PRC. But that should not be a measure of anything. I don't mean, therefore, they should be absorbed. Okay, I didn't mean to say that. But it's only 22 million. Now, interestingly, right after that 1978 decision by the United States government, the US passed the Taiwan Relations Act. which allowed the US to maintain this kind of ambiguity, having an office in Taiwan and then doing arms sales to Taiwan, but then not really, making a show of it, but then doing it and, inviting. And by the way, until 1987, Taiwan was essentially a one-party dictatorship. So it wasn't like democracy versus authoritarianism or anything. Okay, people don't know that. From 1949 to 1987, Taiwan was governed by an iron fist, and that iron fist was the Kuomintang. In 1987, there was a kind of democratization, but the Kuomintang continued to govern for another 10 years, ruthless, against opposition and so on. So the United States cuts this deal with Taiwan anyway after recognizing China as the most significant, as the representative, by saying we'll sell you arms. So they've used Taiwan in a way as an irritant against China. This has got nothing to do with the Taiwanese people. Okay, Nancy Pelosi did not show up in Taipei to basically stand in solidarity with the Taiwanese people. She went to Taipei to just provoke the Chinese government, to see what they would do. Well, the Chinese government, they always think in 5,000, 10,000 year increments, right. Not like in 2 week, 1 day increment. They are thinking eventually Taiwan is going to fall. The government will wrap up, and it'll basically Taiwan's entire economy is dependent on China. You may not know this, but about 20 years ago, Rania,
it's kind of like the whole global economy is dependent on China as well.
They wanted to actually join the United States as the 51st state.
Oh, why would you want to do that?
Well, it's interesting. What interested me was actually imagine, just as a mental exercise, if Xi Jinping decided that, he contacted some government official in Hawaii or Guam, forget Hawaii. Hawaii is too far away. Somebody in Guam, and he decided, I'm going to fly to visit Guam. How would the US react to that? And Guam
horribly.
Guam is.
What's the odds of a hot war between the East and West in this decade? I mean, that's the nightmare scenario, Matt. But sometimes I do think, as much as you see countries like China trying to avoid that outcome, it does seem a little bit like our delusional and the kind of capitalist, imperialist death drive that our leaders have. It kind of seems like that's just the only option for them. They're not just going to hand over the keys to the global empire and be like, well, you got us. You beat us at our own game. You beat us at the game. We thought we had you right under our thumb, and you beat us at our own game of capitalism. And we got our hats off to you. So here's the keys to the global capitalist system. We all know our suicidal, psychotic leaders and ruling class are not going to do that. So as much as I hope that outcome doesn't happen, sometimes it feels like it's the only possible outcome. Even if they turn off the flow of treats, especially then, because then they're just going to blame them. They're going to blame the lack of treats on these countries, which will help justify and manufacture consent for this final conflict. Death drive all the gerontocracy is at death's door. Exactly. It's their final fuck you to everyone else. Their final extended middle finger to everyone else. I hope Taiwan wins the freedom it deserved in 1949 so I can watch President Xi dipping Chiang Kai-shek's bones in honey and feasting on them. Oh my. Oh my. I don't think our beloved President Xi would ever do anything like that. He seems like a very nice man.
It's an occupied zone. It's occupied by the U.S. military. The indigenous people of Guam are second-class
Of course,
citizens.
the U.S. could get rinsed.
Imagine if
of course.
Xi Jinping did that. I mean, that's how the Chinese see it. This was a deliberate act of provocation. If the U.S. is actually interested in the human rights and so on of Taiwan, then the question should be asked of the U.S. government between, at least 1949 and 1987. Not once did you squeak about democratic rights and human rights and so on of the Taiwanese people. You were quite happy with the iron fist of the Kuomintang. It's the same with Hong Kong. When Britain ruled Hong Kong, there were no rights for the people of Hong Kong. We never squeaked once about the human rights of the Hong Kong people. Now they use Hong Kong and Taiwan as a kind of pin to poke the Chinese. Now, there may be real issues involved in Taiwan and in Hong Kong and so on, but this is not what motivates the United States.
Never. It's never what motivates the United States.
I think we're going to have to cut off the video there. I think the only thing that I wanted to take a look at other than that is just, is it this? Okay, first, here's one thing. Here's how things are going in Ukraine. Tell me if you think this is great, if this is a great sign that Ukrainian soldiers are putting out TikToks like this, showing them on the front lines and then showing what's happening in Kiev.
You can count on me, that good old Rob, to talk you through this.
Is this good? Is this good? Thank you, John, for the gifted sub. Very kind of you, John McCain's Ghost. I appreciate that. And the only thing that I wanted to look at also is just, oh, do I even have it? Sorry, one sec. Let me find this here. I'm sure I do. Yeah. Like, just to underscore the sort of coming energy crisis that we were talking about. I just wanted to take a look at this very quickly as well. With the Ukraine flag in the bio, that makes it even more perfect. I just got this electricity bill today. How in the name of God is this possible? We're a small coffee shop in Westmeath. That's an energy bill. You can only see it on the side for 9,836 euros. Let's call it 10 grand. And with the Ukraine flag in the bio, it's literally just like, how could this have happened? How could this have happened? We don't know. Get ready to see hundreds or thousands of similar stories exactly like this across the continent. You know? I keep repeating this, but it's worth saying again. We don't have any idea. I don't think any of us have reckoned with the fallout and the consequences that it's going to be once the temperature drops. And there's so many other cases of this exact phenomenon happening across the UK, in Germany, in France, in other countries that are going to be affected by this. You know, it is going to be an absolute shit show. Pull up the I think you should leave meme. There it is. And this is what Macron is going to be saying. This is what the British government's going to be saying. This is what the German government's going to be saying this winter when this world historic crisis that we've barely even scratched the surface of, when it starts to kick off, this is what they're going to be saying. Folks, listen, I got to get going soon. I'm at 3.5 hours here. It's my longest stream that I've done since I got COVID. I've got to go pick up my kid from school in a couple minutes. I don't want to leave him too long. It's his first day of school. He was not very happy about it. I'm at 11 subs. I'm not going to be a hard ass about this. If we could get a little bit closer to that sub goal, though. I've been going all day here. I didn't take a break. 3.5 hours. It's been a great stream, a great first stream back on the regular schedule.
Good old Rob to talk you through all
Gotta
this.
go catch COVID again, of course. Yes. Thank you so much, Comrade Social Distancing. I really appreciate that for the 2 gifted subs. Very kind of you.
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
Pissed. Thank you so much for 5 gifted subs. Truly the valued community member. Pissed. I appreciate that so much. I hope you had a good first day. Thank you, Crab Island. I hope so too. I don't know. A lot depends on how the connection with the teacher goes and whether he's got friends. I feel like in school last year he never had like.
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
Okay.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
A lot depends on whether he makes really like good friends. I think he had some friends last year, but never really to the point that it was.
Okay, Rob. Seriously, wow.
One more time. This is for you, Dakadoon.
Wow. Okay, Rob. Seriously, wow.
Thank you very much, Dakadoon. That was so kind of you for the 10 gifted subs. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you also to Kijiji Genie for the gifted sub and for the hot beef serving that we experienced yesterday. Thank you, Kijiji Genie. One day I'll have money. I'll be a wealthy champagne socialist artist and I'll fund your revolutionary activities. It's all right, Lana. Lana, I genuinely, I really, really appreciate all your contributions in the chat and in the Discord server. I really do. And everyone in the community does. I think it's really cool that you come and hang out here. So don't worry about it. Thank you so much to everybody. That was kind of unexpected. as usual, but I appreciate you so much, folks. Thank you.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob
look at
to
that.
talk you through all this.
Chaos the Gardener. Is that the first 2 gifted subs from Chaos the Gardener? Thank you so much, Chaos the Gardener. I appreciate that. Very kind of you. Thank you. How do I get my chat to give subs like this? I don't know. I don't even know how I did it, Lana. Do I bully them more? I guess, like, if you convince them that, you know, paying money it contributes to them having like a social connection with you. In my experience, that's been helpful.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Holy Lord. M. Gauntlet, thank you for the 4 gifted subs. That is so kind of you. I can't... Jesus. Thank you very much. I know it's a problem. In my experience, Lana, you have to have zero shame. You have to remove the part of your brain and your personality that experiences shame and embarrassment. That has been my main secret to being able to make us a little bit of a living here on Twitch. I completely just somehow that part of my brain, I just smacked myself with a ball peen hammer until it went away. We made it. The oxygen to Rob's home will continue for 24 hours. Wonderful. Being IRL best friends with the Rob Rousseau is why I sub. Thank you, Ghost. Thank you. And we are best friends. That's true. That is correct. You have to guilt your viewers into subs by telling them your children and or pets will starve. That's a good strategy as well. Also showing them content that makes them feel bad and forcing them to pay you until you stop. That is also something that I have found to be effective. There's a number of strategies. If you can convince them that you're possibly some kind of a deity, some kind of like an omnipotent deity, that has been also helpful. Well, geez, what a great ending to the stream. I really appreciate everyone for supporting the stream. I really, really do. That's really, really kind of everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let me look at who we got here. Okay, so I gotta go. I'll go pick up my kid from school now. I gotta then bring my cat to the groomer, figure out a dinner situation. I got a podcast at 8. I'm all over the place right now. Show feet. I don't show feet. Sometimes I do dance weirdly though, and sometimes kind of like, you could say sensually. I don't know. Some people might say that. Some people might say it's sensual, the dancing. I don't know. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth. But anyway, big night for me that I got to deal with over here. And I will be back tomorrow, 12 p.m. Eastern. That's 1 a.m. Pyongyang time. Okay? 12 p.m. Eastern, 1 a.m. Pyongyang time. I will be back, and I will talk to you then. Thanks again, everyone, for watching. I'm just going to raid now rather than just like staring awkwardly at the screen. Thank you again, folks. See you tomorrow. Goodbye for now. I love you.